Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is April 28, 2021, and in this video, we are going to torture ourselves by trying to watch the Richard Wolff versus Destiny debate. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe and consider supporting us on Patreon. There's a link to Patreon in the video description. So, I have not watched any of this video so far. It's really long. It's 2.5 hours. I have heard about it. I've heard it is not very good, to say the least. We're going to watch as much as we can, see how far we get. Okay, so that's the plan. I guess by way of introduction, I'll just comment briefly on Richard Wolff and Destiny individually, and then we will just jump into the video because, like I said, it is lengthy. Starting with Destiny. The last video I put up on the channel was an expose of socialism done left as kind of a closet racist and some other stuff. So in that video, I referred to Destiny, I believe, as, quote, an irredeemable piece of crap. I'm going to stick to that. He gained a lot of clout for debating right-wingers. That's not actually that hard to do, I don't think. But he himself is a liberal and pretty middle of the road, even like center-right as far as liberals go. And not a good guy. I mean, I really thought he was saying some horrible things. The last clip I saw him in was he was debating the main guy from the Surfs. I'm not really a fan of the Surfs, but even that guy was like shocked at what this guy was saying. So, yeah, not a Destiny fan. And then as far as Richard Wolff, the last thing I saw from Richard Wolff was his appearance on Hakim's channel. And you know, I made a video after Hakim talked to Vaush that I thought he went way too easy on him. I think, again, he let Richard Wolff get away with too much. The very first question was Wolff's thoughts on China, specifically, are they imperialist? And Hakim, to his credit, you loaded it up as saying, you know, our audience is more advanced. Like, you can basically signaling to Wolff, like, please skip the Socialism 101 stuff. This channel is full of, like, you know, established Marxists. Please give us real answers. And he didn't. I mean, like, his thing on China basically boiled down to, well, it depends on who you ask. It's like, okay, well, we're asking you. How about that? And just didn't give a straight answer. So my thoughts on Richard Wolff are that he's really good at Socialism 101. And I feel like he's very non-committal, though, when it comes to, you know, pressing any advanced revolutionary concepts or... Anyway, I think he just hangs out in the kind of this safe zone that I think is somewhat frustrating. I think he also way overemphasizes the role of worker cooperatives, which I don't know if worker cooperatives are going to make a comeback. And, you know, worker co-ops under capitalism, that's a whole separate issue. Talked about that in an audiobook I did, Lenin's on Cooperation, a few months ago. So anyway, certainly between the two of them, if I had to pick one, Richard Wolff is, I mean, probably about 100 times more appealing than Destiny in various ways. Although, you know, like I said, I have my kind of sore points with Richard Wolff as well. But all of that said, let's just get into this. I mean, I just wanted to put my biases and my impressions on both of these two gentlemen, you know, going into it. So, you know, just to clear the air on that.
Okay, in the 3 minutes I have, I cannot speak as fast as you just did, so I won't even try. I'll try to make a couple of basic points. Every economic system in the history of the world displays the following pattern. It is born, it evolves over time, and then it dies and passes away, giving way to another one. And part of that process has always been the conviction of the people in each economic system that sooner or later they can, they should, and they will do better, overcome some of the problems and difficulties they're facing, and organize a system that better meets human needs. The process is sometimes relatively smooth, other times it's rocky. That varies with the conditions and particularly with the level of resistance from those who don't want to see the system change and shift. Capitalism, in my judgment, has been born, most would agree, has evolved over the last 3 centuries or so, and is now at that last stage. The only question now is exactly how and when the passing occurs. Likewise, in my judgment, the yearning for something better has built up in capitalism to a pretty intense level now. Whether you look at the debts of students, whether you look at the mind-bending inequality that this system generates over and over again, unless and until it is revolted against by masses of people who do something about the inequality, only to discover that as long as capitalism remains, the tendency to inequality resumes. I think people are also tired of the instability. Every 4 to 7 years, capitalism crashes. We've had 3 in this new century in its 20 years. Yep, right on schedule, every 4 to 7 years. Millions lose their jobs. Businesses go belly up. Cities and towns can't get the revenue they need to provide the services we depend on. One sign of the exhaustion of this system, a level of money creation, a level of debt creation we have never seen. Government debt, corporate debt, personal debt. The system is exhausted, and the entire private enterprise system is now on 24/7 government life support. I think it's over. I think that's difficult for us all to live through. And we better learn some lessons from the British Empire, from which they have been tumbling for a century. We could and should do better on the downswing than the British have been able to. And the more we talk about it and discuss it and explore it, the better our chances to make another progressive transition to a better system that we all need and will benefit from.
Okay, so those are all solid points by Richard Wolff. I don't think anyone, in a Marxist audience would disagree with anything that he said. My only real comment so far is watching Destiny's body language. He seems like disconnected, aloof, anxious, tense. If you're going to have a conversation with somebody like a Richard Wolff, you got to go in respectful at least of the fact that this guy has been an econ professor for a long time, labor studies professor for a long time, that the guy is smart. I believe he went to Yale. This guy is an advanced professional when it comes to studying economics and, labor relations. Just that what Destiny has been giving off so far is, I think, reflective of insecurity and just a lack of respect. First of all, I'm glad he got all dressed up for the debate here. And, anyway. But I think that Wolff did a fine job there. I'm not sure what, he was referring to as far as Destiny talking fast. Looks like Destiny is about to start. Let's go into that.
Okay, Destiny?
Oof, are you keeping us on a timer?
I am.
All right. As of March 2021, Americans rank the economy, job markets, the handling of the coronavirus, and leadership in Washington as the four most important challenges facing our country. Socialist policies would not alleviate any of these concerns. Countries have tried the socialist experiment. Time and time again, this has failed. Doctors in Cuba moonlight as taxi drivers. Countries with socialized healthcare haven't fared much better than the U.S. in their handling of the coronavirus. And any socialist regime will necessarily involve the bureaucracy of Washington even more heavily in our economy. Any country that has attempted to realize a fully socialist economy has either failed completely, such as in the case of the USSR, destroyed large swaths of their economy, such as in Venezuela, or been forced to embrace more neoliberal economic policies to realize true growth in their economy, such as in China or Vietnam. Liberal market policies work better in both theory and practice when it comes to efficiently allocating resources to maximizing the economic productivity of any country, and we've seen this play out time and time again across a wide variety of markets and countries throughout history across the globe. Oftentimes, people like Richard Wolff will bring up the boom-bust cycle as though it's an inherent flaw of capitalism, but I believe I speak for most when I say that a boom-bust cycle is preferable to just going bust, as so many socialist countries have. It's also important for us to realize that no economic organization is in and of itself inherently moral or immoral, but rather we ought to view them as tools to effect some greater output for our country that we can later utilize and distribute in the most fair manner with government policy to most of our citizens as we see fit, creating a bigger pie, so to speak, from which all of us can eat. Morality and justice should exist in the realm of government policy. We cannot allow it to blind us to the economic realities surrounding us. No matter how much we wish a wild lion not to eat us, our desire alone will never satiate its appetite. While socialism may sound good in theory, the destruction it would wrought on the wealth of our country and the oppressive restrictions it would place on our businesses would not help the vast majority of Americans. It'd be foolish to enforce protectionist or socialist policies on our economy while major developing economies, such as India and China, are moving in the exact opposite direction, having realized time and time again the failures in socialist planning. Socialism implies two major things: a change in both the means and mode of production. The means of production change in such a way to completely disallow private investment or ownership, and a change in the mode of production such that we no longer produce goods and services for a profit. Instead, businesses are only started with the approval of some governmental body, some kind of central planning, with the equal decision-making and management of every worker, and the goods and services produced in any society are what some government body dictates, irrespective of market forces or the wants and desires of the citizens. It's likely in the course of this debate that my opponent will suggest we take after Nordic or Western European countries, citing that things like socialized healthcare or subsidized education are powerful programs that address many of the underserved needs of Americans today. While this is true, I would like to remind everyone that we've spent the last decade reminding conservatives that the government simply providing welfare has absolutely nothing to do with socialism. My opponent believes that strong social safety nets and welfare programs are important parts of the government. Most liberals would welcome him with open arms, me included. Consequently, there are 5 major hurdles that no socialist I have ever spoken to has adequately addressed, and they are as follows. Number 1, what level of violence is acceptable for you to reach our socialist state? Number 2, how do we decide which businesses are allowed to exist in a socialist society without allowing private capital investment? 3, is any form of investment whatsoever allowed in a socialist society for an expansion of business? 4, how are labor markets determined in a socialist society? And 5, how do we calculate which goods and services a nation needs if we do away with the commodity form? Those are my 5.
Cool. All right.
Oh, I don't even know what to say. That was so bad. So I have a lot of notes from that. First of all, my jaw, it was just hanging open. That was awful. I'm starting to get the picture on, all the reports I heard back from how bad this thing was. Okay, so first of all, let me just say I'm not going to be able to hit every point. But all right. I closed my last comments by talking about Destiny's body language. First of all, look at that look on his face. He's just like, I got nothing. Anyway. So I closed my last comments talking about Destiny's body language, looking at Wolff's body language while Destiny was talking. And again, Destiny just seems so agitated. The way he was talking, it's like, slow down there, buddy. He's all over the map. He's, talking Ben Shapiro style, just as quickly as possible. At some point, you see on Richard Wolff's face the realization dawn that he is talking to an idiot. I thought that was very clear. Like in the first 30, 45 seconds, like Wolff at some point, you just see him like looking up sort of into his own head, and he's just like, I'm talking to an idiot. This guy is making no sense. Okay, so there's a lot of notes on what Destiny was jabbering about. Again, I'm not going to be able to hit on all of them because he was just going rapid fire, but here are my notes. The 4 most important challenges wouldn't be alleviated by socialism. Okay, there wasn't really proper follow-up on that. The taxi drivers, moonlighting as taxi drivers in Cuba, what are you talking about? Like, that had nothing to do with anything that was part of his opening comments. He then, I had to back it up and make sure that I heard him correctly. He said that countries with socialized healthcare haven't fared much better than the USA during the pandemic. I don't even know what to say. The US by far has had the most daily cases. It has been leading the world up until very recently in the number of COVID cases. I don't even know what to say. Not to mention the fact that, like, when people did get sick with COVID, they could just go to the doctor, for example, in Europe. Because he was talking about, he kept switching back and forth between talking about socialism and then social welfare systems. That was like, he seemed completely unsure of what he was talking about. Wolff is a Marxist, and I don't even, what was Destiny even talking about? So he's talking about countries with socialized healthcare haven't fared much better than the USA. Okay, we see countries like France, Italy, and the UK struggling, and Sweden also because they weren't following basic public health protocols. We saw them at various points struggling with their response. However, their medical systems were not also charging people $20,000, $30,000 to, get treated for COVID, etc., which has wide-reaching economic implications for the people involved, and then for the country as a whole, as those effects start to add up. But also, let's talk about countries which are actually socialist, such as Vietnam or China, who absolutely were able to handle the COVID pandemic far in a far superior way. Whereas, again, countries with more reactionary governments, look at Brazil, for example, there's almost a direct correlation of like how left-wing the government is and then how well they have handled COVID. But again, that's him jumping in all around. Boy, was he in over his head. So then, this is a quote, "Any socialist regime will involve the bureaucracy of Washington more heavily in our economy." Like, he says that as if that is, I don't know what kind of audience, but a right-wing audience will just go for that on its face, because he didn't back it up with anything. Like, that's just a bad thing in and of itself. We should just accept that. Why? He doesn't say. Also, he does the same thing that Vaush does when he says, our economy. Like, I don't know about you. I don't have a great deal of ownership in this economy. This economy is something that I am subjected to, but I have virtually no agency within it. It's not my economy. I don't really care if the bureaucracy of Washington gets more involved. In fact, I hope they do, because, to a great extent, that bureaucracy is the only thing providing workers' rights. Now, of course, we need grassroots labor movements as well, which is the only reason, we ever got any kind of formal protections institutionalized into the government in the first place. That's a longer conversation. But as far as this idea of the bureaucracy of Washington being inherently bad, who's your audience? Libertarians? Okay. Also, we got Venezuela, quote, fully implemented socialism. What? Vietnam and China are, really, it was just, I'm not even halfway through the notes here, that they are moving away from socialism. This is completely wrong. If you'd like to know more about Vietnam, Luna Oy has a great video. I think it's just titled, "Is Vietnam Socialist?" She gives a great history of why Vietnam had to open up to Western capitalists, the IMF, etc. It's because the USSR was destroyed, and the US had sanctions on them, so nobody dared trade with Vietnam. And they are still under Marxist-Leninist leadership, but they had to open up or their entire country would starve. That's hardly desirable. And make no mistake, that's not due to, basic economics. That is due to imperialist aggression. That is directly due to U.S. interference and politics, not economics. Okay, we then move on to maximizing economic productivity. Productivity has actually been decreasing. There were much larger gains in productivity long ago. Everything under neoliberalism is grinding to a halt because the most reactionary ideologies of capitalism have become predominant, and they're trying to avoid any form of progress. And there's just lots of stagnation in the last few decades as capital, trying to monkey wrench organized labor and socialism, have in many ways also crippled their own system, giving us a more backwards form of capitalism that really resists any type of progress. He gives another line about boom and bust is preferable to just bust. This is, a bumper. This is just ignorant. Then he talks about no system being inherently moral, but then describes moral objectives, which are going to be better implemented by some systems rather than others. I imagine that that's what they are there to debate, in fact. So anyway, after this, he says that capitalism creates, quote, a bigger pie from which all of us can eat. Anyone paying the slightest bit of attention would realize that no matter how big the pie is, the problem is the inequality. If you have inequality, then certain people are going to have access to 99% of the pie, while the vast majority of people have to fight over the crumbs. This is so elementary. I can't even believe that he threw that line in there. But again, the whole thing looked so half-assed. I mean, down to at the end, he's just like, well, I'm done. Like, you know, as he gets rid of his paper and is just like, yeah, well, I said something. Like, he showed up, I guess, is what you can say. Again, going on with all of the random shit he threw in, the wild lion. We can wish that the wild lion won't eat us. Here's the thing. A lion is a natural creature. It's an animal. It's part of nature, just like we are. Capitalism is not. Capitalism, as Wolff said in his introduction, has only been around a few hundred years. Like all economic systems, it is created, it lives, and it dies. This trying to make capitalism out as a force of nature, not a good look, incorrect, and just an elementary mistake going on. Socialism would, wreak destruction on the economy. Dude, look around you. I don't know what else to say. If this isn't destruction, and I guess Destiny would say, socialism would bring more destruction than we're currently experiencing. This is laughable. I don't know what to say, but again, this is the Ben Shapiro technique of talk real fast, say so much nonsense it can't possibly all be addressed. All right, moving on. India and China moving away from socialism. Okay, China is ruled by the Communist Party, and India just had record general strikes with 250 million people turning out. In fact, they have a very right-wing government right now as far as the prime minister. The Hindutva movement is arguably fascist Indian style. However, there is a sizable movement for socialism in that country. So anyway, I guess that was inconvenient. He left that out. He then goes on, and I think this is maybe the crux of it. Destiny says, socialism is a change in both the means and mode of production. This was garbled beyond recognition. Socialism is not necessarily a change in the means of production. Sometimes advances in the means of production can bring about or contribute to changes in conditions that sort of, emphasize the need for a change in the mode of production. Arguably the Industrial Revolution contributed heavily to the emergence of capitalism. But he doesn't know clearly from what he said. So the means of production, that's the technology, okay? The means are what you use to produce goods and services. The mode of production, that's socialism, that's capitalism, that's feudalism, that is slave states. That is the system of property relations and laws. It's the way that society is organized to create stuff. The means, that's the technology you use to create the stuff, and the mode is how we socially organize that process. It's how we structure society and the ownership of the means of production, etc. He got that completely wrong. He said that the means of production under socialism, he said something like the means as private ownership being outlawed. Anyway, that was completely wrong. And again, I think he has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. It's probably going to be incredibly painful. He also then suggests that Wolff is going to bring up at some point that the U.S. should take after the Nordic countries. Is he against this, or is he merely just saying that that's not socialism? Anyway, he finally, thankfully, mercifully closes with 5 points. What level of violence is acceptable in bringing about socialism? Off the top of my head, how much violence are you comfortable with maintaining capitalism? Because a lot of people don't want it anymore. It's causing massive violence. The wars that the United States is constantly engaged in, those are to keep capitalism afloat, not just in the United States, but globally. Capitalism is now global. It's a global system, global stock markets, global investments. The United States is its military might. I mean, it's its main muscle, its main enforcer. How much violence are you comfortable with maintaining capitalism? Because arguably, most socialists want a peaceful transition. If there was any violence, it would be from the bourgeoisie resisting the change in their own name, for the tiny minority of society that they are. They would be resisting the transition to socialism and more economic democracy. So again, I turn that around. How much violence are you comfortable with maintaining the current system? Because it's an awful lot. That's to say nothing of all of the social murder that capitalism engenders, homelessness, substance problems, and just the constant despair and misery that the instability of capitalism engenders. So, all right, moving on to point 2. Points 2 through 5 here, I feel like all have something in common, which is we'll decide it when we get there with the input of lots of people. Destiny lays these out as like gotchas, and I don't really get why. So point 2 is, how do we decide what businesses will exist without private capital investment? Well, I guess this is a 2-part question. Part 1, you could say, well, there are many historical precedents for doing this. We could pick any one of the systems for doing this on a public basis that has been tried already. We can modify one of them. We can combine 2 or 3 of them together. That's not super difficult, and it's up to the people involved in that particular society based on the conditions that they are facing. Also, part 2 is, well, how do private capital firms and private capitalists decide what businesses are going to exist? They fund businesses they think are going to be profitable, not socially useful, not anything like that, but what is going to make maximum return on investment. That's all they're concerned with. So, already we have a system where decisions are made about what is going to get built, what's going to get funded, where are we going to direct resources and energy, etc. What we're suggesting is that we not do this on just what is the most profitable basis and letting private capitalists decide that. I don't know why it's such a radical thought or so difficult, why Destiny would have to struggle so much with the idea that people other than private capitalists could make those decisions. We arguably really don't have an economy that meets people's needs just on the basis of good quality goods and services reaching most people right now. That's because a handful of people are deciding just based on what's profitable, what is going to get done in the economy. I don't think it should be too hard actually to imagine that we could improve on that process. 3, is any form of investment allowed? Again, that's up to the people involved. Also, building socialism as a process, as is stated in early Marxist literature, unlike a bourgeois revolution, when the capitalists took power, capitalism was mostly already built. There was a lot of capitalist infrastructure and the system was there. They kind of just had to take over the government from the monarchies. Building socialism is different. When you have a proletarian workers' revolution, you start building socialism from that day on. At least as soon as the Civil War ends, if you're successful at keeping the bourgeoisie out and actually setting up your new country oriented towards the working class being in control, well, you start building socialism from then on. And there's a series of decisions. So it can be decided at that time, and different countries have done different things. So again, this is not a gotcha, and it's also not super hard to understand if, in fact, you understand socialism at all. And again, I'm not sure he does, because then we have point 4, how are labor markets determined? You think that's a huge challenge? I'm perplexed that he's even putting this forward as a major question that he said socialists can't ever answer. There are plentiful historical examples. I think this is actually one of the least challenging things to, try and wrap your head around. And then 5, how do you calculate needed goods and services without the commodity form? Destiny wants to pretend that these questions have never been approached before, either theoretically or actually. I am curious to hear what Richard Wolff has to say, and so we're going to go back to the video. That was incredibly painful and exhausting. I really hope that this whole conversation gets better. Destiny, again, it's like he was just not even trying, and I hope he stops debating, because this was really, really bad and just an embarrassing start. Here we go.
So we're going to do the open format now for the next hour. I don't think I'm going to need to moderate too much, as long as both of you just say something and allow the other person to speak and don't talk over each other. It should be fine. So I guess begin now.
Where do you want to start?
Well, can I respond to what was said?
Yeah, whatever you want
course.
to do, yeah.
Okay. I find this a laughable caricature of anything I've ever written or anything that I understand is part of this conversation. And I don't appreciate being told what I think or what I say or what I mean or what I intend. I can speak for myself, and that would just be fine if we could allow each other to do that. Number one. Number two, I have no idea what this silly remark that I hear so often is, that no socialist society has succeeded at anything. I have no idea what you're talking about. Let me give you an example. One of the most important metrics used in the economics profession around the world to assess the quote-unquote success of an economic system is the rate of economic growth. You measure GDP and you look at how it grows over time. And then you compare one country to another to assess their relative success, not as societies, because that's a vague generality, but at this particular metric, which we use in economics to measure economic growth over time. It's not the only metric, but it's a widely used one. So I'm now going to use it. In the 20th century, the fastest growing metric, the fastest growing GDP in any country measured was the Soviet Union. And in the 21st century we're living in, the fastest growing GDP in the world has been the People's Republic of China. This is not an endorsement of one or another economic system. It's a statement of fact verified by any reliable source of information. The UN, the project in the University of California, Berkeley, and others who keep track of this. So this has to be understood, because in much of the world, economic growth is a shared objective and goal that these two societies have excelled at achieving. Number one. Number two, when it comes to socialism, it would be useful if we all understood what the word means rather than playing around with caricatures. For example, the notion that socialism is all about what the government does has been contested throughout the history of socialism. And that idea is less dominant within the socialist tradition now than it ever was over the last 150 years. For example, today, one of the most important issues for socialists has to do not with government regulation, not with government owning and operating businesses, not with these bugaboos of bureaucracy and all the rest of it, but has to do with an objective of transforming the organization of production in a factory, in an office, in a store, not to have a small group of people, the owner, the board of directors, the tiny little minority at the top that is a dictatorial power inside an enterprise, making all the key decisions that the employees have to live with, even though the minority making those decisions is not accountable to those employees. That's a socialism of transformation at the micro level, about which very little could have been discerned in the comments preceding these. If we're going to talk about socialism, then we have to talk about what it means to the people pushing for it and urging it. And those people have learned from the 20th and 21st century, just like those who pushed for capitalism 3 centuries ago learned from their early experiments how to refine, how to adjust, and how to change. To pretend that that didn't happen, to trade in old and shrinking conceptions of socialism may be good debating ploy, but it doesn't advance our understanding of anything.
Okay, so you can see here, it looks to me like Wolff can barely contain himself, barely maintain his composure. He looks like he wants to grab Destiny by the shirt collar and just be like, listen here, you little twerp. And I don't blame him. I mean, I just went on for probably way too long in my notes. And first of all, I'm recording this a little bit later at night than usual, so hopefully what I'm saying is coherent. Destiny doesn't make it easy because he threw a lot of half thoughts into his rambling opening that just these ideas were not connected very well, and all of them were very shaky in addition to not being connected well. Also, you gotta love the like slurp off the Red Bull coupled with the whole like slacker aesthetic. The entire time, Destiny looks to me like a, bored, arrogant student who has not done his homework, just gave a totally laughable report. As Wolff called it, a laughable caricature. I think that's being generous. That was, really just a slap in the face, what Destiny said. It was so bad. It was like, you dare show up to debate this guy? So, I had my opening comments about Wolff, that I often feel like he does Socialism 101 too much, and when pressed, never goes beyond that. He really just doesn't, go beyond that. And I think that for those of us who are ready for that, and those of us who are looking for some kind of direction and motivation for, well, what do we do next? Okay, we got it. I've been reading Marx for however many years. Like, what do we do next? You're an elder in the movement, ostensibly. What do we do next? And it just never comes. I think, debating somebody like Destiny, I'm surprised that this happened, to be honest, for exactly the reason that you're seeing, is that Wolff is like, listen, you little twerp, like, who do you think you're talking to? And that was, it's just, doing a book report on a book you haven't read. Destiny is opening his mouth, preparing to say something. If this is the way it goes, I think it's just going to be a train wreck out of the gate.
Okay. If you want, it'd be easier to have more of a back and forth rather than the super long monologues each, so we can respond to each other more, if you're okay with that. Just for a couple of things that you said. So I'm trying not to miss...
I just talk slower than you.
Oh, yeah, no, it's fine. My understanding is that in the 20th century, there was a faster growing economy than the USSR, and it was Japan. Japan still exists today, and the USSR does not. I understand that the USSR did show a huge amount of growth, but I think it's odd to use that as an example when socialists often point to the evils of imperialism, and when you point out the fact that everybody was heavily industrializing around that time as well. I don't think it's fair to say that the USSR simply grew on the merits of socialism when there were so many other things happening at the time, and when it was outgrown by another economy that was...
But those are the facts. You can play whatever games you want. The fact of the matter is that the Soviet Union's performance in the 20th century completely outshines that of Japan. There's no comparison. In 1917, when the Soviet Union begins, it is the poorest country in Europe by far. It then goes through 70 years of a lost World War I, of a civil war, of an agricultural collectivization, and of World War II, which did more damage in Russia than in any other country. Notwithstanding that it was the poorest country at the beginning of this horrific story, it ends up in 1965 being the #1 competitor of the United States for global hegemony. That's only because of its #1 status in economic growth that achieved the overcoming of all those horrific losses. I'm not arguing in favor of this or that about the Soviet Union, but the fact of its achievement is a staggering reality that you can dance around from here to tomorrow, but it doesn't go away because it's inconvenient to confront it. And the same thing is true now. If you read Pearl Buck's novels about China before the revolution, you will hear about a society whose depth of poverty literally blows your mind. And here they are about to surpass the United States before the end of this decade. And that was accomplished by a communist revolution and a government that has been run by a communist party to this day. And yeah, for sure, they cleverly opened their society up to capitalists to come and join them. But to imagine that the achievement of the Chinese economy is purely due to the private capitalists rather than to the state economy, that's making believe, because you need to have an argument that puts the success at the credit of one or the other. The infrastructure, the training of the mass of people, everything that happened in China is as much a product of the planning and policies of the communist government than of any other factor. And that has to be recognized as well. And none of this is an endorsement. That society has strengths and weaknesses. It has things we can criticize. But we can't make it up because it's inconvenient to face the successes they've had and continue to have.
So I've got to say again, I hope Destiny hangs it up after this and just stops trying to do this pathetic thing that he is doing here. I mean, let this be a career-ending moment for Destiny, because Wolff, again, like, credit to Wolff for taking the gloves off. He looks like he wants to kill him. He looks like he wants to tear Destiny apart with his bare hands. He looks like he is struggling not to, like, just start yelling at him. And rightfully so. Destiny is being like a cocky prick who is making garbage points. Wolff is fully engaged in the conversation. Destiny is looking at this, he's looking at that. I'm assuming that he is just, has a like some kind of chat feed of researchers like feeding him talking points during this, I'm assuming. My God. I mean, it's just like, okay. So anyway, that aside, we'll see what kind of, horrible comeback Destiny comes up with here. But let me just criticize Wolff because he's the only thing of interest really going on here. He says here, I'm not arguing for this or that with regard to the USSR or China. Well, as a Marxist, I say, why? Why are you not arguing for this or that? I know that Wolff is all about the economic democracy, and I have heard his videos talking about, how the USSR didn't prioritize, having more workplace democracy, which I think really neglects the fact that the way that the Soviet system worked was leaps and bounds ahead of even the most advanced years of the U.S. Trade Federation's, counterpower within U.S. capitalism. Leaps and bounds, and it was built into the system. So that's, like I've said before, a sticking point I have with Wolff. Let's get down to brass tacks. What do we need to do? And, let's go through, let's argue for this or that. Let's go through particulars of the USSR and China. And let's really start building a blueprint here, because there are a lot of us who are much more ready to have that conversation. And I get that the vast majority of Wolff's time goes into, the end is nigh kind of stuff, and doing these appearances, blowing open-minded liberals' minds about, capitalism really maybe in its death throes, etc. I get that that is his thing. But if we're going to, create something that's going to outlast capitalism, we've really got to get started on that. And somebody like Wolff could be very valuable in that. I know he's got the democracy at work thing going on. I've been involved in a cooperative before. I actually personally reached out. I was like the point person on that project, contacting Dawn, Democracy at Work Network, for consulting for our co-op. I didn't find it that helpful, to be totally honest. So I think there's real limits to that, and we also need to, expand more into the political realm. The labor movement is incredibly weak right now. There's a lot of things that needs to happen. And the best that sort of we're getting on the national scale is like AOC and the Squad. We really need a lot better than that. And I don't know. I just think it's time Wolff kind of steps up more in that department. I'm not trying to insinuate that he's like, got nefarious ulterior motives or whatever. Like I said, I did think the $6,000 honorarium was a bit grabby, but where is it? We've got to have the next stage of the conversation. Again, I think Hakeem pushed him for that and didn't get it. But all right, let's get back to the video and see where this goes next.
Okay, so I'm not saying that the USSR did not grow a lot. Obviously, the USSR grew massively. Your claim is not that the USSR grew. That's not what we're arguing about. It's whether or not the USSR grew at the rate that it did due to socialism. A country that was heavily involved in multiple famines, a country that had...
Okay, I need to just jump in again. This is a note I had the first time around. Wolff addressed it. I'm just going to give you my take. So Destiny now twice has said that the USSR did grow enormously, but that we can't necessarily credit socialism with its growth. Well, that was their system. So if you're not going to credit socialism with it, who are you going to credit? That's their system, okay? When things go right under capitalism, it's always, capitalism gets the credit. Whenever things go wrong, it's socialism's fault, right? It's a ridiculous kind of logic that can never credit socialism with doing anything right. Let's see what Destiny makes out of this.
Heavily went from little industrialization to a lot of industrialization, and a country that engaged in a lot of imperialistic practices is a country that grew massively in the 20th century. To say that all of their growth, or even the majority of their growth, was due to the organization of their economy and not due to factors that were independent of that organization, to say otherwise that they wouldn't have grown, maybe at an even faster rate, had they been a capitalist economy, there would have to be some evidence provided for that. And I don't believe that that's ever been adequately demonstrated. On the contrary, I believe some people have argued that Russia could have potentially grown, the USSR could have potentially grown even faster had it abandoned some of its more outdated forms of trying to manage their economy. When we bring up China, China has grown a lot under certain socialist policies for sure. But when we look at China, especially in the 80s and 90s, China began opening itself up to massive growth when it comes to foreign investment. China is the number 2 country in the world that allows for foreign direct investment. And the coalescing of all of China's state-owned, the SOEs, the state-owned enterprises, into a select few industries, and then the massive opening of foreign investment into that country to give other people more control over privately owned businesses has been what has caused the massive explosion that we've seen of China in terms of pulling people out of global poverty, as you mentioned in the video that you did for the Gravel Institute. You attribute that to socialist policies, but the thing that really pulled China into the 21st century in terms of economic success was the opening itself up to foreign direct investment, was the opening itself up to other economies being able to interact with them more, which are all neoliberal trade policies. These aren't people-owned businesses. These aren't businesses that are ran by the workers. These are, if anything, China is a government that runs the business itself. It's a state capitalist economy more so than any type of socialist or communist economy. To say that a single party regime is having the workers themselves making decisions over how any individual business is running, I don't think is fair to say. I guess and then real quick, just finishing.
Your understanding of China. Your understanding of China, though, is really badly flawed.
Can I finish this last part? The thing that confused...
I'm jumping in again before Destiny finishes, because what Wolff just said is exactly what I had just written in my notes. Destiny has no idea how China works. He is just making stuff up. The Communist Party of China has 90 million members. Destiny is trying to pretend that 10 guys sit around in basically the boardroom executive committee of China and just single-handedly direct the entire economy. That is just, I don't know what to say. This guy has no idea what he's talking about. all that stuff at the top too about, oh, and I think that some people, say that had Russia not been socialist, it actually would have grown faster. And I don't think that's ever actually been adequately. I don't know how long we're in. I think we're in the first 10 minutes here of this discussion. This is so bad. This is like shit tier debating. Destiny is trying to just gish gallop here. It's just painful to listen to. All right, let's get back to the video.
Me the most, and the thing that frustrates me the most, I guess, when I have discussions with socialists, is socialism feels like this very amorphous, ever transforming idea of what it actually is, such that I don't even know why we use the word anymore. So I'm very glad that you've acknowledged that Marx, in through his labor theory value analysis, was absolutely flawed and was an absolute failure. I'm glad that you've acknowledged that the way of analyzing.
I have not acknowledged you're making this stuff up. I've never acknowledged anything of the word.
Okay,
of the
well,
sort. I don't even know where you get this.
Well, earlier you just said that we shouldn't hold ourselves captive to the thinking of thinkers in the 19th century in terms of what socialism is. So I assume you've evolved
No, I didn't do that at all. I told.
If I was Richard Wolff at this point, I would probably text my wife to set off the smoke alarm in the other room and just be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I have to go." What Destiny is doing here is so craven, desperate, yet also pathetically transparent. When Richard Wolff said that just like early capitalists, perfected their system over time out of the early experiments, which were shakier, et cetera, and they learned from, how to manage a capitalist economy to the best of their abilities. And he said that socialists had done this, were, in the process now of doing the same. The USSR was the first nationwide, socialist experiment on a national scale, and that there have been subsequent experiments at running socialism on a national scale, and then with international cooperation between socialist governments. Clearly, he didn't mean that the fundamentals, so Destiny is against the labor theory of value. This should. I don't know what. Here's the video.
You that socialism has a variety of theories within it. It's a broad tradition. It had to be. In the 150 years since Marx wrote, his ideas have moved into every country on this earth at different levels of economic and cultural and political life. And of course, those different people all found something valuable, but they all made their own interpretations. This is a rich, diverse tradition. It's as if you're going to decide what it is I mean when I say these things. I never said that the Marxist theory isn't valuable, that the labor theory of value doesn't apply. If you read any of the books and articles I've pumped out in my life, you'd know that the exact opposite is the case.
Wait a minute.
I want to correct something about China because you keep repeating it.
Okay.
You know why private enterprise and private capital flows into China in the 80s and 90s? Because China had transformed itself from a place where nobody wanted to invest to a place like now where everybody does. Capitalist enterprises went there because they had a well-educated, disciplined labor force at very low wages, because they had built an extraordinary infrastructure, because you had a growing level of income for people to buy things. That's why General Motors produces and sells more cars in China than it does in the United States. The reason private capital went there was because they had, before the arrival, created the institutions. Every other part of the so-called third world, Asia, Africa, Latin America, who had received since the Second World War massive amounts of foreign aid, were desperately trying to do what the Chinese were doing, namely, develop their countries so that foreign private investment would come. China didn't get any foreign aid because they were communists and the United States didn't give them any. But they did a better job than all the countries who did get it in order to get to the point of economic development where it became interesting for capitalists in Japan and Europe to go there. You need to pretend, for reasons I do not understand, that all of the achievements I've just described didn't happen, that somehow they don't deserve the credit. Look, in the world of economics, perhaps you're not familiar, we do exactly what you just said we oughtn't to do. We look at societies and say, they have a capitalist economic system. How did they do? And they have a socialist system with the different meanings of that term. And how did they do? And then we say they're different, and part, not all, part of the story is the different system. And if I say to you that the socialist tradition has multiple interpretations, let me assure you that the capitalist tradition does as well. The leaders of Saudi Arabia right now call themselves capitalists.
Can I ask you, when you say socialist, what do you mean when you say socialist? Then I'm trying to understand what this means. Can you give me
So this is a good sign. When you just get your ass handed to you by a recognized expert in the area that you're foolishly debating, arrogantly just charging headfirst into debating with Richard Wolff, like he is some random neo-Nazi, that you're going to try to show up on your YouTube or Twitch channel. And then at some point, when you're getting your ass handed to you, you go, well, hey, Mr. Person who has written dozens of peer-reviewed articles and probably dozens of books as well on this subject of socialism. I mean, what do you even mean when you say socialism? And this isn't a rhetorical thing to just put it on the record. He has no idea what Richard Wolff means. It's a sincere question. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He is so far over his head and out of his depth. It's just, I would pity him if he weren't so loathsome. And the smugness on his face when he's just like, well, what are you even talking about? How anyone can look at this, I'm just flabbergasted. And how Destiny can look at this and say, yeah, I did a good job. I held my own in that discussion. Severe denial. Let's go to Wolff's response. I mean, he just literally asked him, well, what does socialism even mean? I mean, because he doesn't know. He was talking about the means of production being no private industry. What are you talking about? All right.
Cohesive, coherent.
That's good. No, let me answer. There are a variety. I'll give you three basic strains right now. They don't exhaust it, but they enable us to have a conversation. One strain. You leave enterprises in the hands of private capitalists, but you recognize that that capitalist system is so flawed, for example, in terms of inequality, in terms of business cycle instability, that you give a role to the government of massive intervention, rules, regulations, laws. Let me give you some examples. In France, it's the law that once you begin working after graduating from high school or college, every employer has to give you 5 weeks of paid vacation from the beginning. Nothing like that exists in the United States. But this is a society that won that for its people, by the way, by socialists who did that, and put that on the books, as it is on most European countries. And socialists do that because they believe for them that socialism is when the government comes in and regulates. That's one kind. Here's a second kind. These second kind of socialists, they don't believe it works real well if you do that. It's not enough. So they want to take a different step. They want the government to come in and actually own and operate enterprises, not merely regulate them with rules and laws. Then there's a third kind, which I stressed a few moments ago, which is not about the government. Doesn't care all that much whether the government runs an enterprise or the private does. They can figure out, whichever one works better. Let's be real practical. But for them, what socialism means is the transformation of the everyday life of working people. No longer do you go to work with other people telling you what to do, where to sit, what machine to use, what raw material to work on. And at the end of the day, you go home and you've got nothing more to say about what you poured your brains and muscles into. No. For these socialists, like me, the crucial thing thing is to reorganize the workplace, to bring real democracy, can you believe it, to the place where we work. In a country that claims to be democratic, we don't have democracy in the workplace. We have a tiny group of people telling the majority what to do, fully unaccountable to that majority. You know, if we really believed in democracy, this kind of socialism argues, we would recognize that that's where adults spend most of their adult life, at work. And if you really believe in democracy, it should have been installed in the workplace. But capitalism doesn't permit that. The folks at the top want to keep the power, to keep their inordinate wealth, even at the expense of no democracy and of a growth record inferior to what Russia did in the 20th century and what China is doing now. And that's an enormous price to pay.
Okay, so before Destiny graces us with any more of his profound Red Bull-fueled bursts of wisdom, I just want to comment on what Wolff said. So basically, he just described the broader left. Social democrats, people who want the government to regulate and give workers protections and rights within the paradigm of private enterprise. So welfare capitalism, social democracy, whatever you want to call that. Second, he described more what we would consider, traditional socialism, usually run by communist parties like the Soviet Union, et cetera, where the government basically kicks out all the private employers and organizes industry under its own auspices. Then third, I would say he was actually describing anarchism, which he identified as, and he clearly said that. He didn't call it anarchism. Again, to him, these are all schools of socialism. I think that's a little bit hinky. Again, you can say it's the broader left. It's something sort of, but is social democracy really socialism? I know Wolff insists all the time that this is considered a kind of socialism. I would really argue that it basically is not. I think that like he said, socialists fought for those social democratic rights and protections. And regulations, but that isn't necessarily like what they were going for. That was reform on the road to somewhere else in most cases. That's a broader discussion for another time. But is it socialism in and of itself? Those are the actions of socialists, but they are compromises. So I would just push back on that somewhat. The middle one is, what we are basically oriented towards here at Socialism for All, which is the extinguishing of private enterprise, at least as the dominant form of industrial organization within an economy. And then the third thing that he's describing is anarchism. Now, why do I say that is anarchism when he is always, I think, describing himself as a Marxist and et cetera? Because he rarely talks about the political struggle as Marxist-Leninists or Trotskyists would do. What the vast majority of Marxists, in other words, in the 20th century and onwards. Whereas anarchists tend to be very focused on establishing cooperatives and other kind of like smaller scale projects where the individual and direct democracy are heavily emphasized. And, there's nothing wrong with those things per se, but it tends to be, in the value system of anarchists, like those things take top tier. But I think, as I have mentioned in this video, I have often scratched my head and, I've been pushing Wolff to, at least, impotently in my comments here and in my videos, to go beyond the sort of Socialism 101. And I think I just got my answer as to why he doesn't. Because I think he actually is more of an anarchist at heart. And that as far as the political struggle, he doesn't get so involved in that. He gets real involved in the question of reorganizing enterprises at the micro level. Again, to me, this is very anarchist. Autogestion, this, and again, there's nothing wrong with that. If, I would love to see in the socialist society that I would like to see lots of democracy within the workplace. That would be, I think, definitely something to strive for. And like I said, I've been involved in cooperatives before, And, they have their pluses and their minuses. Of course, I was trying to, work with one under a capitalist system. Lots of difficulties trying to do that. It's not super compatible. So anyway, this has really nothing to do with the debate with destiny, but I think I just sort of unlocked a key to Richard Wolff in this sense, which is I'm not sure he has a broader political program or perspective, etc. He's really focused just on shop floor democracy, and that is it. And to him, that is socialism. Maybe I'll do a video on that later on, because the obvious question is that enough? Is that your struggle for socialism, your struggle against capitalism? Is that enough? I have often criticized Wolff for giving people the idea that just fighting for and establishing cooperatives is somehow going to end capitalism. It absolutely won't. You're ultimately going to have a confrontation with capital and with their politicians and with their military apparatus and all of that stuff if you ever actually become a threat. I think he is coming more from a place of like, capitalism is going to eat itself anyway. It'll become so unstable it can't even stand up. And that's when the cooperatives will take over. I'm guessing here. I'm extrapolating from what he's saying. If that's his plan, I wish he would just come out and say it. I'm inferring here from just what he, the things he tends to emphasizes, which is capitalism is, having crises and it's getting worse and worse, and we should set up cooperatives. Like, that's all I pretty much ever hear him say. So I don't know, I guess that's his plan. And I'm going to stop wondering. Okay, let's get back to this train wreck of a discussion.
Okay, so if you want to talk about the 2 and 3 definitions of socialism, that would be interesting to me, but I only heard 2 definitions of socialism here. Number 1 is just capitalism. I don't know when this redefining happened of taking capitalism plus government intervention and calling it. Wait, well, let me finish. Right? I don't know why this was the case that state intervention into private markets to have some form of regulation or some form of socialized healthcare or giving workers 5 weeks off became socialism. It is clearly not socialism. It's so not socialism that I think Marx himself even said that the state would be heavily required in maintaining capitalism, more so than I guess even Marx was able to foresee, because he predicted a revolution of the proletariat in his lifetime. The idea that the state intervening and providing some sort of social welfare or safety net is that's just strictly a capitalist system with some government intervention. If we want to talk about the concept of the government owning and operating enterprises, or number 3, the idea is that the workers themselves have some worker managed thing, I would be interested in discussing either of those 2 options, as I believe all 5 questions I laid out initially applied to them. But for number 1, I wholly reject that as a form of as a form of socialism. If you believe it is, I'd be curious if you can tell me what is the difference between the first thing you laid out and any capitalist that acknowledges that some level of government intervention is necessary in keeping the economy going.
I'd be glad to explain it to you. The history of socialism gets going in the middle of the 19th century. And at that time, socialists began to argue that capitalism was over, capitalism was done, and a better system was available and should be pursued. And they had a whole bunch of ideas about that. They were a relatively small group. If you know the history of Marx and Marxism, it begins relatively small. As the 19th century progresses, it gets larger and larger. And guess what happens when that movement gets larger? Debates begin to happen inside of it as to what in the world capitalism is and what in the world socialism is. And here we go. Some of the people decided that socialism as a radically alternative system wasn't in the cards. Could never happen in some views, could only happen in a distant future. Well, what then did socialists do in the meanwhile before a real change of system happened? Answer: advocate for the government to be taken over by universal suffrage. The mass of people would institute a socialism that was, if you like, a step in that direction. An early socialism, if you like. And by the way, there were big debates, pro and con, within the socialist movement about this. But they settled to understand, let's call it one kind of socialism. And that's what you have in Western Europe, in Scandinavia, to this day. Socialist parties advocate that, and the people in that society often vote those folks into power. I'll give you an example. The government in Portugal right now, a perfect example, European country. The government of Portugal is a coalition of three political parties. The largest is the Portuguese Socialist Party. The second one is the Portuguese Communist Party. And the third one is the Portuguese Green Party. They were elected as a coalition government in 2016. They were re-elected last year. Parenthetically, if your audience members don't know about this, that's because you live in a society that doesn't tell you about this, even though it's public knowledge to anyone interested in finding out. Those parties push a socialist agenda, by which they mean government rules and regulations. You may not like to call it socialists, but the people involved, and millions of them around the world, do. The other kind of socialism broke away from this first kind in the aftermath of the Soviet Revolution. They were in favor of taking that extra step. Socialism for them meant that the government should take over and operate enterprises, at least the industrial ones, maybe later the agricultural ones. And to underscore their distinction from the other socialists who just wanted government rules, regulations, and controls, they gave themselves the name communist. And that's the only difference between them. And it has been that way for nearly a century now, since the Russian Revolution. And then there's this third one, which has to do with transforming the workplace. Those are all socialisms. They argue, they debate, they have a rich literature. We have lots of empirical examples of all three kinds in the world. And if people want to think about how they work and what kind of society they produce, there's loads of evidence there. We don't have to hypothesize or pretend or demonize either, because really it doesn't lend itself to that if you're serious.
So just for the record, I agree with what Richard Wolff said here. I think that from a historical perspective, he's absolutely right. When I said that I was pushing back on that idea of, is that really socialism before? I grant that there was a movement or a current within the socialist overall movement that decided that, what Marx was actually kind of talking about in the first place maybe wouldn't be possible, and they decided to settle for less. I would say a lot less. When I say, that I'm pushing back in the idea, is that actually socialism? No doubt some people called it socialism, and I'm not trying to say that didn't happen. But as somebody involved in a movement for socialism now, who particularly is trying to lead people away from being co-opted by liberals, I just question the value of, giving it too much credit as socialism, because we really are trying to shoot for something distinct from that. That's not to say that socialists never use reformist tactics. They absolutely do. There is value to that under particular conditions. But to say that we want to move away from capitalism is to say that we want to really move away from capitalism. And if you look at the history of that social democratic sector of, what they used to call social democracy back in the day, which included what we call today communism before there was that split. In Russia, it was the Menshevik and the Bolshevik currents. The Bolsheviks were the communists, and the Mensheviks were more the social democrats and radlibs. Again, I'm coming more from a place of just, yes, historically that's true, although you could also say, historically it's true that they called themselves socialists. On the other hand, we can also say, was it ever really socialism? And I guess that's just my point. If these terms are going to mean something, that's more where I'm coming from, is like, I'm a bit more of a hardliner, because, when does it stop being capitalism? When does it start being socialism? But then again, I am more of a Bolshevik in terms of that is the struggle to keep the word meaning something. Destiny is making a similar argument, although he's not in favor of it. That would be a big difference between Destiny and me. All right, back to the video.
Okay, first of all, just because a government calls itself socialist, I don't think that that's adequate to define said government as socialist. Do you agree with that?
Good. Give another. Fine. You can have another. That's what the debate is about. You make up your
just hold on one
definition.
sec.
Well,
Yeah, okay, so we have to give Destiny a chance to speak as well.
Yeah, wait, well, so my question would be like in terms
you
of
often have
like
opportunities to
sure.
give. Yeah,
I guess
sorry,
like
go ahead.
would you consider like for instance like the Nazi Party? Would you consider that a socialist party as they have socialism in the name? It doesn't seem like a good.
No.
Okay, so what Destiny just did there is a nearly complete departure from the logic of the previous discussion. We went from a good faith discussion of the nuances of the social democratic sector of the broader left and, you know, where that dovetails with capitalism and where it diverges from it. And, you know, my preference is really not to call it socialism because, again, I just more in favor of clearer distinctions for the sake of building movements without things getting watered down. Destiny then leaps to not a good faith point about, well, anyone can call themselves socialist. It doesn't mean that they are, which is technically true, but this really adds nothing to the discussion. I mean, come on. Like, for a second there, we're talking about socialists, talking about reform versus revolution, etc. And then the next minute, it's like, well, Nazis had socialists in the name. I don't know why Wolff is going through with this, but let's carry on.
But
Why not?
The minute you know anything about the Nazi Party, you'd understand that.
Would you say that Portugal is Portugal a socialist economy, or do they have markets? Do they have private investment?
Markets have nothing to do with socialism.
Okay, can you tell me what is your definition of capitalism then? I just, because when I ask you what is socialism to you, I'm like, I understand that you can talk a lot and you can tell me what other people have considered socialism to be, but under your current definitions, for instance, the Democratic, no, you haven't given me your definition. You've told me what other thinkers and what other countries in the past, your definition is not what Portugal does, or it's not what the Portuguese Socialist or Communist Party is. You're giving me what other people or other thinkers have thought what socialism is.
Okay, so Destiny is just being a giant asshole here again. I don't even know what they're supposed to be debating at this point. Destiny's entire opening was trash. I mean, it was D- at best, garbage. It was ignorant rambling. So now we're 20 minutes into this discussion. I don't know what they are supposed to be debating, to be honest. I mean, they were talking about socialism versus capitalism. Destiny had no idea what he was talking about. Wolff had to try to reorient the ship here in terms of what are we talking about? What is socialism? And then Destiny is getting frustrated because Wolff says, well, socialism is a broad tradition that encompasses at least three main schools. We would call them social democracy, socialism, communism, and anarchism. And Destiny is frustrated with this because he wants to, treat Wolff like any of his other very uneducated debate partners and just try to pigeonhole him and then hammer on him. Well, if you had a more specific question, maybe you could do that. But again, I don't know what they're supposed to be debating. And, I made the point earlier in this video that I think in the context of Hakeem asked Richard Wolff a very pointed question about China, and I felt like Wolff waffled, saying actually something very similar to what he said just now, that it depends who you ask, and there are three, broad schools or traditions within the socialist movement, etc. But that really wasn't the question in that case. In this case, Destiny is basically asking a similar question, in a very sneering, snide way. But he hasn't earned the right in this case, because what are they even talking about? Destiny doesn't know what socialism is. Wolff was trying to lay that out. And obviously, to what he was asking, is that a socialist government? Well, Wolff just said it is. Per that one definition of socialism, which clearly he accepts. Now, Wolff also has positioned in what I'm calling the anarchist school of socialism, or the anarchist current within socialism. Destiny, again, I think this is not coming from a place of good faith, nuance finding as it is with me. Destiny is just, throwing things and seeing what sticks. And again, in one of the, maybe the most rude manner possible. Let's see where it goes.
Because under your current definition, number one, the Democratic Party in the United States would be considered a socialist party because they're in favor of heavy government intervention in terms of climate change or healthcare. And I don't know if you would agree. Would you agree that the Democratic Party in the United States of America is a socialist party, or if they rebranded themselves? Okay, so it's clear then that the naming mechanism alone isn't enough for you because the Nazi Party obviously called themselves socialists. I don't think many people, me included, would consider themselves socialist. And it's obvious that there must be some outside definition that you're alluding to, that when you call something socialist. So I'm just trying to figure out what can you tell me, what is capitalism to you? What does it mean when an economy or a society is a capitalist economy? What does that mean to you?
Well, let me answer. I gave you 3 definitions of socialism. I told you they weren't the only 3. This is a debate that's been going on inside socialism, and it's perfectly reasonable for me to give you those 3. It might be nice for you if there was one you could cling to, but that's not the way it is. The tradition is too big, too broad, too global for there to be one definition, as there is in most interesting things in the world, and certainly in many large organizations and large traditions. I did give you my own. My own is focused on the transformation of the workplace. It's more interested in the micro transformation than in the macro ones, and particularly skeptical about the power of the government as having had some bad consequences. I want to learn from these early efforts to build socialism so that the future revolts against capitalism will have a better outcome than the ones that we've already had.
What is capitalism?
Let me finish. They achieved many things we want to hold on to, and they made some mistakes we want to avoid. And that's exactly what it means to learn from the past. Now let me address the question of capitalism. Here's what capitalism is not distinguished by, and therefore is not useful as a definition. Markets. Slavery has markets. It's a different economic system. Feudalism had markets for much of its history. That's not a definition of capitalism that's unique. Capitalism doesn't uniquely have markets. That's silly. Free or controlled markets, which is all we've ever had in the world, the controlled kind, are as old as Plato and Aristotle, who argued over markets. By the way, both of them opposed markets and thought they were socially destructive institutions, just for as a footnote you might be interested in. But capitalism is unique in one way. It's not a system that's unique in its markets. It's not a system that's unique in its quote-unquote free enterprises. Those are as old as Methuselah. But here is what's unique. Earlier systems, for example, slavery, organized the production of goods and services around a dichotomy, a slave and a master. The master owned all the equipment, all the means of production, and including the worker himself and herself. He owned them. And that was a very unusual way of organizing things, but it existed for a long time. Did it have markets? Often. Did it sometimes exist without markets? You bet. Then there's feudalism, radically different. No master, no slave. Nobody's anybody else's property. But you know how that works? You have a small group of lords at the top and a mass of serfs at the bottom. And the way the system works is that the serfs swear loyalty to the lord, and the lord in return to the serf. And the whole thing is sanctified in Europe by the Catholic Church.
Okay,
let me finish. Then comes capitalism. It's not a master and a slave. It's not a lord and a serf. It's a completely different arrangement. It's a contract. It's an employer and an employee. They don't swear anything to one another, and neither owns the other one. But they enter into a contract in which the employer says, I'm going to give you a wage at the end of the week. You're going to give me your brains and muscles for these hours of these days. And that's a deal we're going to make. And that's how we organize production. That's the distinction of capitalism.
No,
that's
it's
what
not.
I mean by
that,
capitalism.
you haven't given me a definition of capitalism at all. You've told me a bunch of things that capitalism isn't, and then you've given me a bunch of random collected facts of history, but none of these things
Not at all.
are... Wait, hold on.
I didn't
Absolutely.
do that.
For instance, when you talk about how markets aren't unique to capitalism, that's great. Worker management isn't unique to socialism. Worker management can exist under a capitalist system right now.
Well,
I know that
never
you like to
used
talk
the
about
phrase.
Mondragon a lot.
I never
Mondragon...
used the
Hold on.
phrase.
Let this.
Okay, so this is not going well, and I really need to jump in at Mondragon, or Mondragon, as the rest of the world calls it, is a large worker cooperative system in Spain. I'm just speechless, and I'm really surprised again that Wolff is just going through with this. Destiny looks bored. He's utterly disinterested in learning anything. That is obvious. Wolff is going through, summing up historical materialism and the progression of the modes of production, and he's trying to put capitalism in context. If you actually want to understand, which Destiny obviously doesn't, what someone like Richard Wolff thinks, what any Marxist thinks about capitalism, you need to understand its place in history. This is, which Destiny is dismissing, and failing really to make a convincing dismissal here of all of that history. He wants to just talk about, well, what is let's just define it. And then that's exactly what Richard Wolff is doing, though. You just don't like the definition because this is too big for you to understand. You're way out of your depth, etc. What Wolff is doing is completely reasonable, and Destiny wants him to just, lay down a couple of sentences that he can just hammer on. That's all he wants to do. He's not interested in learning a damn thing. He doesn't want his audience to learn anything. He just wants to look good, and he's failing miserably at it. He's making himself look like a complete jerk. That's what he's doing. On that note, let's proceed.
Finish. Let Destiny finish. We're going to go one at a time here, okay? So let Destiny finish it and we'll continue.
When we talk about worker-managed firms or worker-managed co-ops, these things exist under capitalism. What are you saying then? Can I, hold on, real quick, I'm sorry. Can I get an explicit answer that is answered within the last 50 years without going back into feudalism or what the Pope said or the schism of the Catholic Church? I want to know very concretely, without moralizing or loading anything, or without talking about something that happened in 1850, what is capitalism to you? Can you just tell me or explain what capitalism is? Because it sounds like, go ahead.
Any definition of anything is the process of separating it from that which it is not. That's all any definition ever was.
But we don't typically give definitions by naming every single thing that something's not.
Okay, let him answer. Let him answer this.
Dog is you differentiate it from a cat. Otherwise, there's no way to do it.
That's
to
not even
differentiate
true.
and to give a definition of capitalism, you have to distinguish it from that which it is not. Those other systems didn't use an employer-employee relationship. That is the core distinguishing quality of capitalism. Slavery doesn't have that. Feudalism doesn't have that. And I never used the phrase worker management. Managers are not what we're talking about. Owning and operating. If you want to use a word, it's workers as their own boss, workers as their own board of directors. If you like, you can use the colloquialism in the United States that has existed throughout our history. A worker co-op, a cooperative, one worker, one vote. All decisions, majority vote. That doesn't exist in capitalism. That exists in a different relationship among the people at the workplace. Not slavery, not feudalism, and not employer-employee, because those are different people in each of those systems. Worker co-op, that's no longer the case. That's why it's a radically different socialist system, unlike any of the others.
How can you say that that's unlike any of the others when co-ops can exist today under capitalist economies?
Slavery can exist and did.
You're not answering my question. I want you to give the negative of everything I'm saying. You're saying today that this is a unique thing that exists.
There's never been a problem in any society of which we have historical record for different class structures, different systems to coexist. You're asking me a question as if it were Is this possible? It's never been anything other than the norm.
But you're telling me that in your society, or I could be wrong, you can correct me, but it sounds like in your society, you would exclusively like firms to be in the hands of workers, which would necessarily preclude.
Not at all. I've never written that. I've never said it. You're just attributing things to me.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm trying very hard to understand what you're saying, but the problem is your answers are very long-winded. And you're not really answering my question. So, am I to understand then that you are in favor of a society where workers have the option to vote on and have control over the workplace, but there's also room for private investment and the government intervenes in things like healthcare or education? Is this like the type of society you're aiming for?
My guess would be that the transition from capitalism to what I'm talking about would have long periods of time, typically, where these different class structures, these different systems coexist with one another.
Okay, that's what we have today.
First of all, we don't really have that today. Not in really significant numbers, we don't have that. There are a few flukes of worker cooperatives. In fact, worker cooperatives in the late 19th century were much more widespread, to the extent that you can call them widespread at all, than they are today. There are very few worker co-ops in the United States, just like labor unions are way down. Also, Wolff absolutely is answering the question. Destiny is flat wrong and just, again, being a dickhead when he says, you're not answering my question. He's not answering the question in the way Destiny wants, which is a pat, simple answer that Destiny can just hammer on. Because the questions they are talking about are not simple questions. What is capitalism? What is socialism? These are not simple questions with simple answers. They describe vast historical processes which occur involving hundreds of millions of people over long periods of time. Destiny is, again, showing zero intellectual curiosity here and that patented arrogance of trying to be right rather than having an exchange and discourse. So Wolff is doing a great job. Destiny keeps saying, hey, your answer doesn't fit in my tiny little box. Yeah, that's because, you know, it's like you can say, what is God? It's like, well, it depends who you ask in what period of history, and this is not a simple question. Back to the video.
No, you don't have it in anything like the way I want it.
Well, how do you want it? What's different from your vision than what we have today?
Well, what we have today is predominantly capitalist with smatterings of the other. I'm interested in having predominantly socialist with smatterings of the other.
And that's the difference. And without disallowing private investment or disallowing individual owners, how do you get there?
Private investment is a completely different matter. You can have private investment and worker co-ops.
How?
It exists. What's the problem?
Why would I ever invest in a company without gaining some amount of equity in the company? They have no obligation to return to me any profit. I would never invest in a co-op.
Why would you invest in you invest in businesses in the United States?
Correct, because businesses.
For example, let me finish. Hoping, for example, for something called a capital gain.
Mm-hmm.
You hope that if you buy the shares and if the company does real well, you will be able to sell the shares at some future point to another investor at a higher price.
Correct.
If that company's growth is the product of its worker co-op organization, you're perfectly happy if you can make an investment that grows over time.
But in your world, those shares don't exist.
Give you an example. First of all, there exist where these kinds of enterprises exist in the world. So this is not a hypothetical.
Then they're not worker co-ops by definition.
Sure they are.
A worker okay, tell me, my definition might be incorrect, so you can correct me. My understanding is that what makes something a worker co-op or what makes something employee-owned is that the means of production or whatever firm you operate at is wholly owned and operated by the workers, meaning that when profits are generated by that company, they're returned to the workers. And when decisions are made about that company, those decisions are made by the workers. If that is the definition that we're going by, there is no room for private investment there.
Right, but that's the wrong definition and not the one that operates in the world.
Give me your definition.
The definition of a worker co-op is that the workers make the key decisions. They are their own board of directors. They may make the decision democratically, to raise capital for their business by selling shares.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here. This is also going to be my last comment of tonight. I need to go to sleep and I'll resume my commentary in the morning. My voice may sound a little different when I come back. But I think actually Destiny is a little bit closer to being correct on this technical point. Obviously, Richard Wolff is very involved in the cooperative movement. I also have been fairly involved in the cooperative movement. And as I understand it, most worker cooperatives, indeed, the only kind of shares that they offer are worker cooperatives. That is pretty standard. You can, if you're in a worker owner in a worker cooperative, you can, of course, go to a financial capitalist and seek a loan. And so, an outside investor could profit off of your business in terms of like the interest on the loan, that would be generated in the time that it takes for the workers, the cooperative, to repay that loan. However, as far as directly buying shares, I guess some co-ops do have more than one class of shares. You would have a worker owner class and then an outside investor. At that point, you really are starting to dilute the meaning. Let me go a step further and say that as far as types of business entities, so let's say you want to open a business. There's different ways you can do that. You go to the Secretary of State in your state usually. You can file paperwork to open an LLC or a corporation, or just file a DBA, doing business as, to just run a business as an individual under a business name, whatever. Some states actually have a specific form that is a worker cooperative. And I believe that in most states that have something like that, you only have the one class of shares. So again, I think that Wolff will hear what his answer is in full. But I think on this technical point, this is getting into some weird territory. I think Wolff is also backtracking a bit because he said explicitly before that, in as far as a, well-established, widespread chain of cooperatives that would function, I guess, at first as like a parallel economy to the capitalist hierarchical economy, that he considered that socialist if, it's a cooperative where the workers don't merely manage the business, but actually own the business. Okay, fine. But now if you're saying that an investor, actually owns a piece of that business without being a worker owner, I don't know if that's where he's going or if he's just saying that the worker owners are the investors. But, Destiny's not making this easy. This whole conversation is a clusterfuck. Let's put it that way. It's all the more unfortunate in that case to see Wolff appearing to stumble, and because of this technicality. I don't share Wolff's enthusiasm for cooperatives. I think that you need a much more far-reaching definition of socialism than that. There's nothing necessarily wrong with cooperatives, except that depending on, the size and the amount of capitalization and the, number of people involved in the stability, like any other small business, you have great odds of not succeeding because that's the way capitalism is. It's ruthlessly competitive, and businesses just go under before they ever get started in the first place. So anyway, we'll see where he goes on this. And like I said, my voice is probably going to be different when I come back because I'm going to get some sleep. Let me just add, though, listening to Destiny is anxiety inducing. The guy needs to chill. He's all about just winning this debate rather than having an honest discussion and exchange of ideas. I think that's fundamentally because he has nothing and knows nothing. Anyway, just as I sign off for the moment, it's just like, wow, I'm wound up just listening to this guy. It's really grating.
Of course they could do that. Those shares would not allow the people who own them to do the steps that they can in capitalism. They would not, for example, be able to dictate who's the board of directors, because the workers themselves are their own board of directors. But there's no problem with private investment. There never was.
And my question is why? Let me give you an example. No, I don't need an example. No example. We have this definition. Okay, I just want to.
Okay, so I'm back, and here we have Wolff saying, "Let me give you an example to clarify," and Destiny, like completely trying to talk down to him, not a good look, is saying, no examples. We have a definition. Let's hone in on that. Well, that's exactly what I was saying before. He wants to just game this conversation. He doesn't want to be educated. He doesn't want the audience to be educated. He just wants to, quote, win like this is a game rather than a discussion of far-reaching questions of massive importance for the entire world. I'm not saying that this particular conversation is going to, change the world in a profound way immediately. What I'm saying is that the topics they're discussing, capitalism and socialism, how to move on from capitalism, which is inevitable. These are huge questions that are not easily answered. They're not easily gamed, and nobody can come out of this saying like, yeah, I owned you. That's not how this works. Yet that seems to be Destiny's approach.
And on this definition, okay, my question is why would any individual ever invest in a company that doesn't have a fiduciary responsibility to their investors? So for instance, in your world, if I were to buy 20% of a co-op, their workers tomorrow could say, you know what? We're all bored. We don't want to do this anymore. We're going to move on. We're shutting the business down. And now I've just completely lost out on my investment because they have no responsibility to me because I have non-controlling shares. If the only shares you're selling are non-controlling, why would any private investment ever come in knowing that that co-op never has an obligation to make a profit or return a dividend to the investors?
There's many companies listed on the stock exchange right now that pay no dividends to their investors here in the United States. It's a normal part of our
No, absolutely not. They might not pay
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about Capital Markets 101. They might not pay a dividend, but
then you're badly misinformed.
I'm not bad. I promise you, the foundation of the stock market in the United States is a returning of capital to the people that are the ones doing the investment in companies. Now, it might be the case, as you correctly point out. It absolutely. It might be the case.
Really.
Yeah, really.
You're unaware. Most of the most dynamic companies in this country are selling stock to people to whom they have no responsibility, legal or otherwise, to give them a dividend ever.
Okay, Professor, do you believe that a dividend is the only way that you can return capital to shareholders?
That's not the point.
That absolutely is the point.
You made the point. What is the company responsible for? The company is responsible to run the company. They are not responsible to give money back, whether it's dividend, return of capital, or any other way to the people who give them the money to buy shares. The people who give them the money are gambling. They hope that they can sell the shares for more, and they will sell the shares to anybody who can buy them. The company is not responsible to buy those shares. The company is not responsible for what price they can get. If they lose their shirt, tough luck. It's not an obligation or a responsible. That's the way the law of this country works for the stock market. And there's no problem in a worker co-op saying to investors, we're going to grow better than what you can get from a capitalist enterprise. So buying a share of our stock will give you a better shot to sell it at a higher price later. And I can give you examples.
Wait, I don't want examples.
No.
We don't need examples because
I'm going to give you an example of a company that did that, just so you can see why an investor would do it. I mean, really, you can make the theater of your hand on your
I'm not
face.
making the problem is you said something that's just so on its face absurdly incorrect about the characterization of U.S.
Okay, Destiny needs a spanking here. This is really just petulance, like personified, and Wolff is right to call it out. As far as what they're talking about, I'm going to go with the econ professor, not like scruffy Red Bull dude. This is so laughably awful. First of all, as far as the question that I was pushing back on Wolff about, which is outside investors and co-ops just violating the definition of co-ops, or at least stretching the definition of co-ops, I would still like to hear him talk about that more, partly for my own edification. I don't think it's that complicated a subject, actually. Admittedly, my experience is at the smaller end of the cooperative spectrum. And, these are companies that never would go public or, offer shares on the open market, etc. That's also not something I don't think goes in the spirit of cooperatives as far as anything I am familiar with. And, you know, this channel is mostly political in the sense that we talk about, you know, national revolutions and things like that. I also, long before I ever did this, back in like 2010, 2011, spent a lot of time reading cooperative literature. Anybody wants to go to usworker.coop, it's the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. I read that thing inside and out. I read bylaws, I read conversion guides, you name it. And the idea of outside investors getting heavily involved in a cooperative is something that does fly in the face from everything I have read. I am very interested, honestly, in hearing Wolff talk about that because I'm not sure what his angle is, so I'd be interested in that. Unfortunately, the conversation now has gotten bogged down in Destiny's, you know, lack of knowledge about what companies are or aren't required to do, and he's acting like a brat. I mean, this is just he's throwing a fit, and you know, you're talking to a guy here who, whether you think what he says makes sense on its face or not, respect the fact that there's a good chance the guy knows what he's talking about, and you might just be unaware of whatever it is that he's about to say. It's also possible that he's, you know, wrong or lying for, you know, to make his cause look better, and be aware of that. But I mean, there's a strong possibility that there is just a knowledge mismatch. And in fact, mismatch, I think, sums up this entire conversation. Destiny has absolutely no place. I'd love to hear how this came about, because Wolff spending 2.5 hours on this dork, it just doesn't, anyway, back to the video.
Capital markets. Do you not agree that there exists a legally binding, the SEC literally regulates fiduciary responsibilities to investors? I don't like this trick you've pulled by making it sound like, let me finish, please, let me finish. Let me finish. You've made it sound as though I believe the only way to return capital to shareholders is through dividends. That's absolutely not the case. That's one reading of it. You can return it via stock buybacks. You can return it via increase in growth of a company.
You're not obligated to do any of that.
You absolutely, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders. Of course you do.
If you take my advice, I teach these courses. If you read what fiduciary responsibility means, it's an abstract generalization. It can be easily demonstrated in thousands of legal cases that there is no obligation of any material sort that they return money to the people who invest in them. It is perfectly okay to run your business as you think it should best be done, short of committing fraud or illegal activity, and that would apply in any system. The investor is taking a chance, buying your shares in the hopes of selling them at a higher price. It happens all the time, and it would be perfectly consistent with workers who run their own enterprises and are their own board of directors. That's not a problem. Never was. There's nothing inconsistent with private investment on the one hand and worker co-ops on the other. Now, if you have a worker co-op system, they might decide, because we have democracy now, that they don't want that they would like to be the owners as well as the board of directors of their own enterprise. That's possible. That would be one of the variations of worker co-op economic systems, just like we have variations of capitalist systems.
Can I ask you, in a private business in the United States, if I invest my money in a business, a publicly traded business, if they were to cash out all of that money, just close the business down and run, you're telling me that in the United States that company wouldn't be held liable for scamming its investors?
Absolutely. If that company had a good lawyer and showed that they made an honest effort to have a business and then it didn't work out and they closed it down, the investor would have absolutely no standing.
Exactly. You're right. But you used a word there, an honest effort, and it's doing all the heavy lifting in that statement. Of course, you absolutely must show a court that you are making a good, this is part of your fiduciary responsibility. You are making a good faith effort to return money.
That's what the worker co-ops could easily do. We're making a good faith, honest effort to make a business. And that business requires us to do X, Y, and Z. And the private investor got nothing to do. That happens every day.
That's not what a worker co-op's maximizing for, though. A worker co-op, if by your definition, which is a democratically voted organization, is going to be trying to take into account what their members are voting for. They might not.
Okay, so I think whatever point they were originally trying to dig at and dig into, whatever the original point of disagreement was here, it is now lost because Destiny is a moron. And Destiny is trying to argue, it sounds like, that running the business well for its worker owners. And who is running the business well for the worker owners? The worker owners. That's who's in a cooperative. Would not be making a good faith, honest effort to run the business well. Huh? It's literally their livelihood. Why wouldn't they do that? It makes zero sense. It's like he's thinking that the worker owners are, like not actually working for their daily bread at the business. Like that's how they make their living. Why wouldn't they make a good faith, honest effort? If that business closes, they have to go get jobs under a boss. Why wouldn't they try to do that? So again, I think whatever the original point was, and I was dealing with it, last night in terms of real time listening to this video, it came up 10, 15 minutes ago. I don't even know what it was they were trying to get at anymore. I feel like I had a nuanced point I wanted to ask Richard Wolff. Destiny is just dragging this discussion down.
Not vote in the best interest of a shareholder. They might vote to do something completely different with the company.
That would be understood by the shareholder.
But that's my entire
By the way,
point.
Only the most naive shareholder in the United States believes that the company's decisions are intended to do the best for the shareholder. I can show you 50,000 legal cases in which that's not the case, and which it is contested in the courts, and you could have that in a worker.
That's great, and I can show you the Dow Jones, the Nasdaq, and the S&P 500. We could go to the UK and look at the FTSE 250, the FTSE 1, and I can show you histories of markets where companies do reliably over long periods of time return profits, whether in the form of dividends or the increase in your share price, to people that invest in those companies. I'm sure you can show me a lot of things that happen that are bad in capital markets where companies scam people, much as I can show you bad things that happen.
Oh, what? Destiny just moved the goalposts dramatically. First, he was talking about a responsibility to return money to people. Now he just said they are good because they have returned money to people before. This conversation, it's like you're reading from a piece of paper that is actively going through a paper shredder and then trying to make sense of what's coming out the other end. It started with a point, but the bottom of the page has gone through the shredder already.
Happen like famines under the USSR. But pointing out to a few bad actors does not clear up the problem of the fact that investing in a co-op where the workers have no obligation to return anything to an investor.
We're not talking about bad actors. You're inventing these things. We were talking about private investment and worker co-ops. You had made a statement that these somehow couldn't coexist. I'm explaining to you that there's not the slightest problem. You want to change the topic, that's very nice, but that's what the topic was. We weren't comparing goods and bad stories. We were explaining how and why private investment is not an either or in relationship to worker co-ops. One of the fastest growing industries in Spain is something called the Mondragon Cooperative Corporation. Mm-hmm. It's a family of worker co-ops.
They're not even worker managed, though. I don't know. This isn't even a good.
It is the seventh largest corporation in Spain.
It's a federation of corporations.
Excuse me?
It's a federation of corporations, and it's not even worker managed. That's just worker owned, and they have all the same exploitative problems. They go to South America for labor. They rely on contract labor. Chomsky's criticized the Mondragon thing for existing in a capitalist framework forever. And even if this was your go-to killer example, the Mondragon Federation of Co-ops exists under a capitalist framework.
Could I finish, or do you need to tell me about the Mondragon Corporation?
I didn't mean to interrupt your lecture. I'm sorry. Continue.
Sure you did. Come on. Who you think you're kidding? The Mondragon Corporation has many parts. The biggest single part of it are a collection of worker co-ops. If this were the United States, we'd call it a holding company, which is a collection of subsidiaries that do a variety of things. It's very common in the United States, and it's very common in the world of worker co-ops to do that as well. The different divisions help each other. The co-ops support one another. That's how the Mondragon Corporation went from 6 people in 1956 to over 100,000 now. Most of the people in the Mondragon Corporation function within their members, about 200 companies, each of which has workers, one person, one vote, making democratic decisions. This company has been extraordinarily successful. It has outcompeted its capitalist competitors. That's how it became so large. That's how it becomes so successful as it has been. It has rules. It maximizes, because you raised that before, a variety of objectives. It is not focused exclusively on profits. The notion that profit is the bottom line is the very convenient economic nonsense, because profits go into the hands of the capitalists at the top. And of course, they want the company to maximize profits because that's what they get. They don't maximize wages because that's what they don't get. Other people get that. If the other people ran the business, its objectives would not just be profit, but the well-being of those workers, the community's well-being, a whole lot of other objectives to maximize. And you'd have to choose among them. You wouldn't have the essential profit maximizing, which we teach in economics, without explaining to our students that by maximizing profit, the whole company's life is devoted to maximizing the return of a very small number of people within it. Okay? This is what is changed in a worker co-op. That's why it's so different from capitalism. Its decisions, investment, growth, distribution of income, all the big decisions would be made with a different set of objectives, because a different set of people with different interests are making those decisions. For a society like ours that blabbers on about democracy, you'd think this was the most attractive possible way to proceed, because it democratizes the economy by democratizing the enterprises at the core of that economy. Instead, we live in a society which pretends that you can have political democracy, even though in economics you have an autocracy, a tiny aristocracy running each enterprise, doing what it wants, maximizing the part of the output it gets, namely the profit. And therefore, we get surprised that our political democracy doesn't work real well. Hello, that's because it's trying to sit on top of an economic system that is the opposite of democratic. The proposal of socialists is a proposal to extend democracy from the political realm to the economic realm. Why that is frightening to people who otherwise say they favor democracy, I find amazing.
Okay, before Destiny shares his, I'm sure, brilliant, blindingly blazing findings with us, let me just say, I don't disagree with a word that Richard Wolff just said. I know I've said earlier in this, I'm, critical of cooperatives. I also said I have been heavily involved in the cooperative movement before, being a worker owner at a cooperative myself. The reason that I turned more to politics is because I felt in our current situation in 21st century United States, it's not going to cut it, and we need to move on to, political solutions. So I also, I just felt like that is the step that needs to happen. Sure, we need cooperatives. We need democracy on the shop floor. I'm all about those things. It's just that, to me, setting up cooperatives and hoping that one turns into Mondragon and that hoping that another one turns into Mondragon, I don't think that that is enough. I think you actually have to engage and struggle directly against capitalists, whether that is with the militant labor movement, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, it was about going beyond the cooperatives at some point, because the situation is just so dire. Circumstances are so tense in this country now that, anyway, we need more. And I wanted to get more into the history of how do you take that next step? How do you go from, a system of Soviets and worker centers to running the country? How do you do that? Now, so I don't think capitalists are going to give up their power voluntarily. I think Wolff's theory is that they're just going to lose power whether they like it or not. So it won't be voluntary, but it doesn't have to come through struggle. If I was interviewing Wolff, I would press him on that point, because that, to me, is the big sort of weak link in his system of thinking. And it has nothing to do with the economics per se. It has to do with, I don't see a historical precedent for that in a situation like we have, with a very weak labor movement, without cooperatives, and how are you going to build up the cooperatives in that amount of time, et cetera, et cetera. If the cooperatives are the factor that's going to change it. So, yeah. I'd like to bring up another point here before we get back to the video, which is, I called Wolff an anarchist before. I mean, I mostly stand by that. I was thinking about this last night after I turned the video off, and I have actually been thinking, this is actually a good opportunity for some time, about addressing the question of the, quote, classical Marxist. You see people saying this sometimes. Like Chomsky, for example, has gone on record, who I think basically identifies as an anarchist, has gone on record as saying that he doesn't see Leninism, Marxism-Leninism, as being part of the Marxist tradition. Okay, he doesn't think Lenin was a Marxist, or some close variation of that sentiment. Okay, you hear Wolff basically doing kind of the same thing of, like, he's a classical Marxist. He's not a Marxist-Leninist. He's not a Trotskyist, but instead he's closer to this, like, original mid-19th century version of Marx. And the problems I have with this are numerous, and why I say I think basically you're an anarchist using some Marxist ideology and neglecting all the political parts of it. I think that that's better than being an anarchist who doesn't, being an anarchist who basically just completely disregards Marx, because Marx contains very important economic analysis. And I mean, the whole concept of historical materialism is key if you want to know what capitalism actually is. But the thing to me is, like, if you read things Marx wrote, for example, Political Indifferentism, which I did an audiobook on the channel of that particular writing of Marx, he says very clearly the need for a political struggle against the bourgeoisie, et cetera, and it's basically a criticism of anarchists. So as far as people who pull this, say they're classical Marxists and they don't like, how Lenin took it to the next level, basically, what would you have had Lenin do, I guess, is my question. Like, being in a situation where you've been working towards the October 1917 revolution for 20 years. You devoted your life to it, as have, thousands, tens of thousands of your comrades. You have devoted years of intense struggle, multiple failed revolutions. Many people have died, been imprisoned, etc. You need this. You need to end capitalism. And what else concretely would you have done? Because in that situation, the Mensheviks were actually the majority in the Soviets. They refused to take power. They instead entered an alliance with the bourgeoisie. If it had been up to the Mensheviks, the Social Democrats, the what he's calling the first type of socialist, the bourgeoisie never would have relinquished being the dominant power in Russia. So is that really socialism? As far as his saying back in the 19th century, when Marx was still alive, for example, that some socialists were saying, actually seizing the means completely and kicking out the bourgeoisie completely, people theorized then it wasn't possible. Well, the Bolsheviks showed that it was possible. And I just don't entirely understand that criticism, or why people still say, I'm a classical Marxist. It's like you're ignoring over 100 years of history, really like 150 years of history that ensued after, Marx was out of the picture. So anyway, let's get back to the debate. But I wanted to make that point. I do feel like, Wolff's analysis certainly is grounded in basic Marxism. And I'm not trying to, what I'm saying is it's basic Marxism in the sense of these are Marx's basic first, foremost contributions to anti-capitalism and reforming the existing socialist movements, as it was. Why I say it's basic is because that was the beginning of round one, and many important socialists have come along since then. And Wolff seems to endorse none of them. He says, well, they made mistakes and they also had successes. And it's like, okay, dude, but pick a side, because yes, we all agree that we can learn from Marx, okay? Everyone. But just saying we should build more cooperatives, I don't know where that's ever really worked. Not that cooperatives themselves are bad or that they don't work individually, but I don't see how they drive lasting revolution. So that's more my question. And I think that this classical Marxist thing is sort of just a cop-out. Anyway, that's Wolff and I clearly are on the same side in terms of I'm agreeing with his broad points by and large, whereas Destiny is a bug, a gnat, who absolutely serves no constructive purpose in here. But, this is why it's like, why debate a liberal who has no interest in learning at all? In fact, his whole thing is he's playing to a right-wing audience who just wants to see the smackdown, okay? Have conversations with people who you're basically on the same page with and, try to improve technique, strategy, tactics, that kind of thing. I just don't see the point in these conversations. All right, moving on.
It's equally amazing that throughout this entire monologue, all you're advocating for are liberal markets with a little bit more government intervention. If you want to talk about Mondragon, absolutely. If you want to talk about Mondragon, we can talk about Mondragon until we're both blue.
Why does Destiny insist on mispronouncing that? Why? He couldn't look worse if he took a literal egg, cracked it on the desk, and dropped it on his face. It just... Why do this? It's bad. Tap out.
In the face. One, it's not worker managed, okay? It is just worker owned. A lot of the management that comes within a lot of the Mondragon Federation come from other workers, but they do not vote on all of their policies or productions. That is absolutely not true. Number two, Mondragon does run itself for profit. That's why if you only change the means of production and not the mode of production, you are still producing commodities for a profit. Now, it happens in this case that the profit is going to the workers, but it still absolutely runs for a profit. That's why socialists point to it and say, look at how successful it is. Part of the reason why it's successful is the amazing revenues and profits that it returns to its workers that are generated. And then number three, Mondragon, in order to continue growing, continue growing, one of the problems that Mondragon has started to face recently, and it's one of the reasons why it's criticized by people like Chomsky, is because it's had to continue to acquire more and more workers that do not get controlling shares, that don't have the ability to vote what's going on. Mondragon also trades across markets, including going to places like South America and trading with exploited workers. So I don't think that Mondragon, and finally, Mondragon exists under a capitalist mode of economics. Like, Mondragon exists and interacts with other people within a capitalist economy, which I think is good. If Mondragon works and succeeds, that's awesome. I think it's cool. I like to see alternative types of businesses succeed. But I don't understand how you can talk about the successes of Mondragon and then say that, like, well, this is an example of the failures of capitalism when Mondragon exists and thrives right now under a capitalist framework, interacting with so many other capitalist sections of the economy and so many other capitalist countries in the world. My problem is that by moving more towards what you want, you would use government policy to necessarily disallow the types of private ownership or private investment that have been so important with other types of inventions or creations around the world. You can keep saying that I'm making stuff up, but at the end of the day, the problem that we're
Let
having...
me explain.
The problem we're having is the definition of socialism, and I notice that this is it seems to be a key problem with people that call themselves socialists, is your definition of socialism is so amorphous and...
Okay, this is a blatant lie. It's a blatant lie. Now, Wolff's definition of socialism is a little too broad for me, but he gave you a definition. He said that socialism is a vast global tradition which has multiple strong currents within it. You could break it down as saying there are three primary ones: social democracy, socialism, communism, and anarchism, I will say. I think he would call it classical Marxism, but like I just commented, I think he's really better describing anarchism. It's just false to go back to this earlier talking point of it's an amorphous definition, because even within those three things, Wolff just laid out for you which one he goes by, which is micro level transformations of workplaces, shops, into more democratic institutions that do not have outside ownership, or they're not owned in a hierarchical way. They are cooperatively, democratically owned, etc. So this is just extreme laziness and disingenuous, what Destiny is doing here. These aren't his criticisms. He is saying, well, and look, even leftists like Chomsky. Nobody's talking about Chomsky but you. Wolff didn't bring up Chomsky. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. He's throwing that in there like, look, Richard Wolff, your hero, Noam Chomsky. It's like no one mentioned him. So I hope no one came away from this being impressed with Destiny. This is, just a despicable, it's like he is just doing a nosedive straight into the ground and then declaring himself the winner. It's cringeworthy in just a painfully embarrassing way.
Morphing at any particular point in time. I still don't really have...
Well, you seem to be having trouble with it, but that doesn't make it amorphous.
It absolutely is amorphous. Even your definition of capitalism is absolutely amorphous, where I hear ruling...
Well, you're just not familiar with it.
I'm absolutely familiar with it. I absolutely am able to... If you would like to ask me for my definitions of many of these things, I would be glad to explain it, and you can tell me, you can correct me, Professor, if you think I'm incorrect in my understanding of things. But I believe that when I ask you to tell me, what is capitalism, what is socialism, and it feels like I'm listening to Trebek, read off the board in Jeopardy, I feel like that's damaging to the position that you're trying to explain more so than me ask you the question.
Yeah, well, let me correct you about Mondragon, which is, by the way, how it's pronounced. Mondragon has multiple parts. Some of the parts are the adjustments it's made to living in a capitalist world. That's absolutely correct. That would have to be. Any worker co-op that forms now or has in...
Wait, Lance, can you hear me?
Losing the connection. Richard,
and industries that grew up in feudalism. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Do you mind repeating that last line? You just cut out there for 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Any worker co-op that forms now has to exist within a framework of a society that's organized differently. That's exactly the way it was when capitalism emerged out of feudalism. The early capitalist enterprises, towns, villages, had to exist within a feudal framework. They had to come to terms with that. Some of them were able to do it. Others of them disappeared or were overthrown by feudalism until they got big enough and strong enough and learned from the mistakes of early experiments in capitalism how to set up a system that would be what it now is, the global system. I expect the socialists to kind of replicate that experience. Russia was an experiment. China's a better one. Cuba, Vietnam, and so on. They make efforts. They're learning what you do, what you don't do, what you replicate, what you avoid, and they will get eventually to the scale and sense of how to do it on a more global scale. That's how feudalism happened. That's how slavery happened. That's how capitalism happened. And it's reasonable to expect that's how socialism will happen. There is no simple definition of socialism that would be, to use your words, correct. No agency gives you out a license. This is correct. That one isn't. A tradition as lively, as global as socialism is always going to have different interpretations, different definitions that argue with one another. That's healthy, that's normal, there's nothing fuzzy or amorphous about it. The idea that you can have one definition is an authoritative and authoritarian notion that there isn't debate and contestation when there always is. My job was to give you three of the major definitions of socialism that contest in the world today, that are widely accepted. By everybody? Of course not. But those are the ones that are around, and it's reasonable to talk about the tradition in that way. Mondragon is, let me finish. Mondragon is an experiment, a very successful one. You can, if you like, attribute everything to capitalism that happens that's good, and attribute everything bad that happens to the absence of capitalism.
I'm not doing
This
that. I've
isn't
never
very
done that.
interesting. And that's really not very interesting. And I'm not going to get into that. I will tell you
That's good, because
that
nobody
there are
brought
some
it up.
remarkable.
Actually, just for the record, that's exactly what he did. This guy has no integrity at all. Continuing.
Things that Mondragon has done. Along the way, the majority of its workers voted the following rule. The best paid person in Mondragon cannot get more than 8 to 9 times what the least best paid person is.
That's
This
not
was an
true.
attempt to I've been there.
Okay.
I've watched it.
It's just not true. So you're telling me that of all the
It is
employees
true.
in Mondragon, the highest paid employee,
that was a decision. That was a decision made by a large number of the worker co-ops that make that kind
so
of
you're
decision.
telling me that the highest paid employee in Mondragon, it has a ratio of what they're.
Let me finish. In many of the component co-ops.
There you-
'cause
okay,
it's
that's
a
correct,
Holding
yes.
company. It's a holding company of many co-ops. In many of those co-ops, I can't speak for everyone, this was a common rule.
Sure.
I went and spoke with them. I interrogated them about it. And that's what I discovered. They passed a rule after much debate that a maximum difference of 8 to 1. You know that corporate CEOs in this country get roughly, on average, 300 times what the lowest paid worker or even the average worker in their employee class
What is the
get.
ratio of
they
the-
were
what is the
able-
ratio-
Let me finish. They were able to do something about inequality. Wow, here they are, successful and growing. They're the 7th biggest corporation. They're the envy of most other corporations in Europe who cannot show such a history. But they were concerned not just to maximize profit, but to do something like limit the inequality that otherwise is so corrosive to societies like ours. And they were able to do that. That's an interesting quality. Thomas Piketty released a book in 2014 in which he demonstrates in 600 pages that every single capitalism we have a record of has built into it a tendency to ever greater inequality that is only periodically interrupted by revolts from below, like what we had in the 1930s in this country, which never are durable, because once the revolt passes, the tendency of capitalism to inequality grows. That has always been an inspiration to socialists to advocate for a system that might have within it a built-in mechanism to at least reduce the inequality that haunts capitalism. And the reality is that Mondragon, and not only that, have demonstrated that there is a quality of worker co-ops that does and effectively a good job of addressing the inequality that otherwise haunts capitalism. And that would be an interesting way to understand why socialists would be drawn. They are not worker managed. The way a corporation works is there are 3 layers roughly. The employees who do most of the work, the managers who supervise the employees, and then another group of people to whom we give the name directors, the board of directors. The shareholders elect the board of directors because they're the ones who receive legally the profits, and they decide what is to be produced, how it's to be produced, what technology to use, where the production happens, and what is done with the profits. The managers don't do that. So to talk about workers,
gentlemen, we're coming up to the hour now. We have had a disproportionate amount of talking time, I think, by you, Professor Wolff.
Okay, Destiny just got saved by the bell there because he was getting pounded into the ground. I didn't want to interrupt Wolff. I had a couple of points I wanted to make. I didn't want to interrupt that. Thank God for Destiny that, the moderator intervened. Can I just say, as far as that working backwards here, why did Destiny not talk as much as Richard Wolff? He had nothing to say. When he did have a chance to talk, all he would do is do some short gotcha question asking for a definition or some shit. He had nothing to say. He didn't really have a coherent presentation to make. He just kept trying to like dig and jab at him, but he didn't have an overall course or flow. I mean, you could hear it in that opening statement. It was a total just ragbag of like 24 very loosely connected half points. It was just a bag of scraps, you know? So I'm not surprised he didn't have, you know, that much talking time. He didn't have that much to say. Wolff, on the other hand, was just pummeling him here. And Destiny trying to, you know, do a gotcha with, you're not telling me that Mondragon or Mondragon has a 8-to-1 ratio. And Wolff's like, well, you know, it's a federation of cooperatives, but most of them do. And he's like, yeah, see. I don't even know what he was going for there. It's like he's just trying to needle him on these little points. Just concede that the guy is pummeling you. He has buried you. It's over. And the best you can manage is pestering Wolff a little bit. I mean, and even then, it's just, it makes you look like you have a lack of grace. It's just awful. So I guess we're moving into a new phase here.
Well, at the same time, Destiny, would you want to give a closing statement to this as we're coming up? I'll give you a couple minutes to respond.
I mean, I take issue. Sure,
Q&A.
yeah. I mean, man, there's so many things. Citing, I just think it's incredibly disingenuous to open with Mondragon has 80,000 employees and they voted to have an 8-to-1 pay between owners and their or not owners, the highest paid employee and the lowest paid employee. But that's not true. You corrected yourself after I corrected you, which I'm grateful for. It's within the co-ops, within that federation. I'm willing to bet that if I were to ask you, you probably couldn't tell me what the highest paid employee within the Mondragon Federation is. What is the ratio of their pay to the lowest paid employee of the Mondragon Federation? Because it has an incredible vertical structure in terms of how it interacts with itself. Now, I could just as easily construct you a world where the ratio of pay between the CEO of Amazon or Walmart is much smaller, where the ratio closes between their lowest paid employee. If I create a Walmart or Amazon holding company and I simply split off all the managerial people or some sectors of that company into their own individual companies and break it up like that, the way that Mondragon has. Not to say that Mondragon has failed. Not to say that they have totally different sectors. They have. I'm not making this stuff up. Everybody can go and look at how the company is structured. Everybody can go and look at the different types of things. They have grocery stores. They've got a financial sector.
All right. One at a time.
Yes, but they do not separate out their managers. They do not separate out one group of workers with high pay from others. That's a hustle. That would be a hustle.
I agree. It would be a hustle.
About Mondragon is just, that's make believe. You know,
do you acknowledge that
your argument is so difficult that you have to make up the information to support it?
My argument is so concrete that I don't think I've had to bring up feudalism a single time to make any of my points or ask you any questions related to any of your points.
Make your analysis a little richer than it is.
Something I'm curious about. Why wouldn't you consider, just going by the incredibly generous definition you give me on point one of socialism, why wouldn't you consider the Democratic Party in the United States a socialist party? As a party that wants to see more stuff returned to Americans, wants to see people with greater control of the workplace, had members that were pushing for 20% ownership in the share of companies, Bernie Sanders at AOC. Why wouldn't you consider the Democratic Party in the United States a socialist party?
Okay, let me take a stab at answering that before Wolff does, and then we'll compare my and his answers. By that definition, you could say that there is a socialist wing of the Democratic Party. The United States really only has mainly two political parties. I mean, large ones with large membership. They are coalition parties. They are big tent parties. There is a white nationalist wing of the Republican Party, and you could certainly argue very convincingly, and I think accurately, that all of U.S. politics is tainted, colored in some way by white supremacist ideology and a white supremacist vision, even if it is not openly so. And in fact, the only parts of U.S. politics that aren't are the ones that are really actively, pointedly against it. Like, that is the default. There are other wings that just aren't concerned with, right-wing, pseudo-populist whatever. But these are big tent parties. So there are many different factions within each party. That is the point. And you could say that there is a socialist branch of the Democratic Party. It's not particularly successful. It's not particularly large in terms of, well, its membership is fairly large. A lot of people supported Bernie Sanders, for example, if that's what we're calling socialist, again, by that definition. But in terms of overall quantity of politicians, there's not a lot. There's, the squad and then Bernie. Bernie actually really is even an independent who just works within the Democratic Party. So it's not big, but you could say that, there's a wing. As far as, the rest of the party, most of them are neoliberal. They're actually undoing regulations, or they're just doing the bare minimum, which really lags behind most other countries, at least ones in a similar situation. Also, by now, find me a country that is purely capitalist. You talk to a libertarian, they will always say, oh, well, that's not pure capitalism. So if we're saying that nothing is pure capitalism, then everything at least has, by these standards, by this logic, some twinge, some tint, some hint of socialism in it. So, by now, it's been a long time, 170 plus years since the Communist Manifesto was laid out. Socialism became a widely popular, widespread idea, and everything by now is colored by it. Capitalism can't run on a pure basis. They figured that out a long time ago. So that's not what I call socialism. I am an actual Marxist, and, I'm also invested ideologically in the revolutions of the 20th century and actually existing socialism today. So I don't go by this, classical Marxist pure standard. And by the way, I'm not trying to say that Wolff does that. I think some classical Marxists do try to play that game of say, well, I just like, Marx's original idea and it's never been tried and blah, blah, blah. I hear that Wolff doesn't do that. I just also think that he doesn't commit enough in terms of, what do we do now and strategy beyond just co-ops. Anyway, that would be my answer to the question, is that everything is colored in some way by socialism. But to say that the Democratic Party overall, which bends over backwards to praise, the freest markets it possibly can manage, those are its goals overall, because it's owned by the 1%. That's who donates to the party. That's who controls the party. Hope that's clear.
Because it opposes almost everything you just mentioned. It has a small wing now that is in favor of it, who, by the way, call themselves socialists. But the establishment of the Democratic Party, its history over the last 100 years since Franklin
Wait, that's
Roosevelt
not fair. Why would you
history,
talk about the history of it? That's not relevant.
Because history is always
it's
present
absolutely
with us.
not relevant.
This guy is such a chump. I'm sorry. How do you say history is not relevant? The picture of anything, particularly in politics and economics, just like in biology, okay, when we're talking about evolution, it's a transitional form. Moment to moment, it's changing based on the circumstances and conditions of history, of the time and place in which it exists. The fact that Destiny is having an allergic reaction and freak out to Wolff even saying the word historically, he's having a temper tantrum because he can't control this discussion. He wants to treat it like a game. He's a control freak, I think. And he just can't handle a discussion that is not within narrowly defined game terms. Then guess what? Get out of politics. Go into computer programming. Because if you can't handle nuance, multiple perspectives, and so on, you can't handle politics, economics, and questions that involve all of them, such as changing the mode of production, the collapse of economic systems, the change of between eras of history, which is historical materialism. It's a monumental discipline which combines elements of many other disciplines to arrive at a grand narrative of history, which, you can zoom out and get an overall general picture. You can zoom in and get a lot of specifics out of it. And he can't handle this. And hence the freak out.
Said yourself that
Absolutely
said yourself that the way that we look at socialism
Biden
today is different than it was 100 years ago.
Joseph Biden is a product of that history, as he himself says. That party has been unable to make a government. They couldn't even preserve the level of government intervention that was achieved in the 1930s. The last 70 years have been a rollback of the New Deal, an undoing of it, and that was done as much by the Democratic Party as the Republicans. The Republicans pushed harder. The Democrats could not only not advance on what was achieved in the 1930s, they couldn't even preserve it. That's why we have an unemployment problem now and have had a terrible experience.
I think we have an unemployment. No, absolutely not. An unemployment problem.
Politician proposed a jobs program of the federal government the way worked so well in the 1930s. You couldn't even have the courage to come up with what was already done. It's been a retreat. The Democratic Party has been a retreat from what it did before. All that AOC and Bernie are trying to do is to bring back the little bit of socialism that the last 75 years of the Democratic Party have been devoted to getting rid of. That's why they're so embarrassed, these political centrists, by the rise of the left. They thought it was over.
No, this is unimaginable analysis of politics.
Okay, I don't know where Destiny is going with this, because what Wolff just said is 1,000% true, and all of Destiny's dramatic eye rolling and the shifting in the chair and everything just speaks to his insecurity. I don't know how you could possibly contest what he just said. Possibly. I mean, he's about to do it. Let's see.
Political parties today in the United States. I don't think the closed shop policies that Biden are advocating for represent some walk back in policies, or I don't think that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party push equally or even remotely similarly for the types of economies that they'd like to see today. Whether or not you have problems with how the Democratic Party functions, I don't know if your issues are with the Democratic Party or with the politicians that Americans elect. I know that it's a very popular pastime among lefties to demonize the Democratic Party for not being able to authoritarianly or totalitarianly rule the country.
So this is infuriating. Again, I don't know why Wolff is even tolerating this discussion. To characterize, it is left whining or whatever Destiny is doing here, to describe average working people's frustration at the rise of the far right over the last 4 or 5 decades. You could say maybe starting with Nixon as the proto-form, definitely Reagan and the moral majority and that entire Reagan-Bush machine. Bill Clinton as a right-wing Democrat in the 90s, the Gingrich Congress in the 90s being a very reactionary Congress that was able to pass legislation the likes of which we had not seen in a very long time. Talk about undoing the New Deal. Does Destiny deny this, that has been under successful attack for decades? The emergence of the Libertarian Party, George W. Bush's, the Supreme Court put him in the presidency into the White House. The wars for oil, the war on terror, which is a war for oil and geopolitical advantage under the guise of terror. It just goes on and on and on. It's been a steady, and then you get Obama, who's supposed to be, hope and change. What did he do? We got Trump right after. This has been one steady march to the right the entire time. Just the impotence of trying to dismiss this blatant failure of the Democratic Party to do anything positive or constructive for working people. And in fact, the demonstrable history and reality, the votes are there on record right now. The president, Joe Biden, has a long track record of taking away bankruptcy privileges for people. It goes on and on and on and on and on. There have been so many things that are not just objectively harmful, concretely harmful to working people, that prominent Democrats, who are ostensibly the leadership of the party, have been working for and contributing to, but by international standards. We want to say, well, by those standards, which we're trying to use a global standard, historical standard for socialism, nothing the Democratic Party is doing is in line with that. In fact, everything that they're doing is in line with right-wing parties. They are emboldening finance capital, on and on and on and on. This guy is just a germ. I don't know where he gets off saying what he's saying. This is it's a farce. Continuing.
Absent, the other half of Congress, it seems like a lot of people on the left don't seem to understand how our government functions. I don't know if that includes you or not. But
well,
yeah, I think just given
we have folks like you that will help us.
I guess we'll see.
Yes.
All right.
The thing that I've learned the most today, I'm happy to see that the Democratic Party, under definition 1 of socialism, I guess, is considered at least somewhat of a socialist party view, as they are believers of enterprise and private capitalists. And I guess,
I just spoke against that. How you got out of that?
You started to appeal. You started to appeal to things the Democratic Party has advocated for, or you appealed to a history 100 years back. Okay.
We've turned into a Fox News channel. Let's slow it down. We're gonna get right to the audience Q&A. Okay. All right. Yeah. So we have hundreds and hundreds of questions. Unfortunately, we're not going to get to all of them. I'm going to try and time both of your responses to about 2 minutes. So I'll give you like a 10 to 15 second warning when you're coming up to that. So the first one is going to you, Destiny. What could convince you that your system or your defense of capitalism is wrong and that socialism is a better path forward?
I think seeing these things tried on a smaller level and then having more success on larger and progressively larger levels would be convincing. The thing that oftentimes troubles me when people advocate for different economic systems is, much like Wolff has done and says, maybe in the future he won't say he's done this, but the moralizing of like the relationship between an employee and employer, or the moralizing of different aspects of who owns the means of production or who works in the means of production. I'm not really interested in the relationship between a boss and a worker.
Okay, so that's interesting, because you know who is interested in the relationship between a boss and a worker? Every worker. So Destiny has just espoused a very anti-worker talking point. Every single worker wants more power on the job. Everyone. Every worker wants not to be exploited. Every worker wants not to be abused. Every worker wants not to be pushed around. Every worker wants to work more collaboratively on what their schedule is, what their duties are, etc. And that's not to say that everybody wants to be the star or wants to be the president or whatever. Some workers really just, do want to go in, do their thing, get out, whatever. But they probably would like to work during the times that they would like to work, at least as far as that is possible within the bounds of whatever type of work is being done and the needs of the overall enterprise, etc. All of those things, which are driven by top-down managerial decisions in any hierarchical business, tend to become a lot more fluid when workers actually talk about it and say, well, I could do this, and if you do that, I'll do this. And people actually cooperate with each other, and you suddenly find that, if everybody compromises a little bit, then there's just a lot less compromising going around for most of the workers as a whole, because you're actually able to allocate your resources and play to your strengths and interests and then cooperate so that no one is really forced into a position of weakness. That is just how more democratic institutions tend to work, at least when they're functional and, healthy, which, sometimes they can get mired in drama of whatever kind. Anyway, what Destiny has just said is that he doesn't care about the relationship between employers and workers. Well, that he just told me he doesn't care about me. If you're an employee, he just said he doesn't care about you. So what the fuck does he care about? Just investor relations, investor profits? Well, congrats, you're a capitalist, and nobody fucking cares. In other words, you have an absolute mathematical minority there, and it's a very small minority at that. So Destiny has just said, I only care about 1 to 10% of people. If we're going to include like the smallest employers, 10% of the population. Okay, great. But don't be too shocked if you don't get a lot of support for that. Okay, so moving backwards onto the first point of, wanting to see success at smaller levels, on and on. Unfortunately, that is not, historically how socialism has worked for specific reasons, because the capitalists are not operating on a small level. They don't actually tolerate challenges to their power terribly well. And they will try to snuff you out, in some cases, literally by ending your life, depending on where you are, place and time. I know history is a challenge for Destiny, but there have been major crackdowns on socialists in various forms all throughout the modern history of capitalism. So just saying that, socialists can set up their experiments, well, they can't. How do you take control of a country? Well, the bourgeoisie, armed to the teeth, in some cases with nuclear weapons or in alliance with powers who have nuclear weapons, will fight to the death. And they will use every tactic conceivable. This is in part where fascism comes from. Capitalism under threat, particularly from emerging workers' movements, will become, they'll pull out all the stops. They'll do whatever's necessary, no matter how brutal. I would argue that the George W. Bush years, the war on terror, building off of the 80s and 90s slides into neoliberalism, were out of necessity. They needed to shore up their system. And they're completely willing to resort to whatever kind of horribly antisocial methods are necessary. So this is just, to call it disingenuous, I think, is even giving it too much credit. It's a joke. As I said before, this conversation is a farce.
More interested in are the material conditions of people at the end of the day. If different relationships are more beneficial to growing the economy rather than shrinking the economy but producing a quote-unquote better relationship.
Okay, just real quick again. Destiny is unconcerned with inequality. He just wants, as he said in his opening, a bigger pie. This is a rising tide lifts all boats. It doesn't. In fact, capitalism is a system of exploitation, and there are winners and losers. The bigger the winners, the smaller the losers. In the sense of the losers get hurt worse. So he doesn't care about inequality as long as the overall economy is growing. However, whether all that growth is going to, one person or 10 people or 100 million people, he isn't concerned with. And in fact, as Wolff pointed out, capitalism has been demonstrated to have a severe tendency towards inequality. So if you're arguing for that system, you are either turning a blind eye to the inequality, or you're just saying, I see it and I don't care. Well, that undercuts your point. Why would any worker vote for a system knowingly that is going to hurt them, is going to tend towards their impoverishment and disempowerment? Again, the interests of owners and workers in capitalism are diametrically opposed. The more you pay in wages, the less there is left over for profits. That's how it works. So this whole bigger pie thing is meaningless, and Destiny is not in any way meaningfully dealing with the question of inequality. This is important because you can have a giant GDP, and if it all goes to 0.001% of the people, then you still have widespread poverty, and it doesn't really help anybody but that tiny, tiny minority. And who cares? Why are we doing civilization if not to give a good standard of living to people with dignity and security, etc.?
I'm more in favor of the former than the latter. I like capitalism because I think that having private enterprise adequately allocates capital into sectors of the economy that desperately need that capital allocated to it. I understand that Wolff is laughing because he's probably going to say something like, oh, well, what about healthcare and education? And I'm so glad that me and the rest of my liberal and even neoliberal friends agree that there are times when the government can step in and it can alleviate some of the problems that the free market doesn't address. For instance, capitalism doesn't solve well for things like healthcare or education, something that we desperately need to realize in the United States as we work to, I guess you could say, socialize those industries,
So working off of my last point of why are we doing civilization at all, Destiny just said that capitalism doesn't provide well or solve well, whatever. It doesn't handle medical care and education well. I would add housing to that as well. Those are the actual foundations of human existence. If you're saying that the economic system that you're championing doesn't at a fundamental level, support human existence very well. What are your values? I mean, what does it do well that you care about so much?
I'm so glad can happen in a capitalist framework.
All right. Professor Wolff, do you want to respond to any of that or just get a direct question? And if you are going to respond, I'm going to just keep the timing to the 2-minute window.
No, I think this is rehashing stuff we went over. So how about another question?
All right. So for Professor Wolff, were a state to become socialist, how would it thrive within a hostile capitalist world without resorting to the authoritarianism and imperialism of 20th century socialism?
I find this sort of remarkable, these kinds of questions. Imperialism. The imperialism that we study as people who are interested in this topic is a product of capitalism. The subordination of the third world, Asia, Africa, and Latin America, was a subordination organized and operated by capitalist institutions and capitalistically dominated societies. Imperialism, serious issue for sure, but it is a serious issue that is the product and the activity of capitalism. If you would like to talk about things the Soviet Union did and China has done in terms of their activities in and around other countries, and you want to apply the term imperialism, fine. You'd have to make some adjustments because the logic was different and the outcomes were different. And the scale of it was utterly different. We didn't have, the Soviets and the Chinese, at least not yet, have had not organized world wars to hold on and to expand their imperialist empires like World Wars I and II. So I find the whole question strange to.
I'm just going to jump in for a second and say what Wolff just said is a much better answer to this type of question than what he gave to Hakeem, which was a long-winded, rambling answer that didn't really get to the point. This is more to the point of the question. I think it's a better answer. And I wonder if part of it is Destiny has just gotten Wolff's blood flowing and he has, sort of dropped this stodgy facade a little bit.
Put forward, especially without any explanation. And now to address briefly the question. What a state that became socialist would do depends on which of the three basic definitions I offered that state embraced. If it believed that socialism was what you have in Western Europe and Scandinavia, that's what it would do. It would have no problem. Excuse me?
Oh, we got 15 seconds left.
Okay. That's what it would do. If it followed the Soviet model, that's what it would do. And if it did the kind of thing that I'm advocating and the socialists like me do, then it would be devoted to changing the organization of enterprises by bringing democracy into enterprise inside capitalist enterprises.
Okay, to Destiny, do you think that Jeff Bezos works hundreds of thousands of times harder than his workers? Why should he be the richest person in the world?
You don't get compensated based on how hard you work. You get compensated based on the demand for your particular set of skills. There's probably less people that can work in the position that Bezos does than there are people that can work in any other more entry-level position at Amazon.
Wow.
Okay.
Wait, do you disagree with that? Do you think just as many people could handle being the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company as could handle being somebody that works in a grocery store or a fast food restaurant? Is there a simple yes or no to that, or am I about to get another lecture?
Well, you don't want an answer. You just want the answer you want. You don't want it in a form that I would prefer.
Can I get an answer that doesn't involve feudalism?
That's not cute. Is that what the point is here?
Okay.
Why don't you just let me respond without coaching me how to do it? Can we do that?
Okay, I'll give you 2 minutes. We'll go there.
Fine. The idea advanced by you earlier that you don't have one person walk away with $200 billion, roughly the estimate of Bezos's worth, and the vast majority of his employees unable to pay for their kids to go to college, is a distribution of the profits of that business that is morally reprehensible. That's how the wealth was accumulated, by the distributions of share dividends to shares, share expansion, and share improvement in value. We have a system that rewards one person with 200 billion and another one with $30,000. That's a remarkable decision to make in a community that calls itself democratic, or that likes to believe it wants to give people a fair and equal chance. No fairness here, no equality. It is revolting to me that anyone could find this reasonable. And to explain it by saying there's a demand, that's simply what the corporations give each other, the demand. They're the ones who create the demand, which they then fill with themselves, because they're the ones who hire each other for that job. It's a remarkable self-serving system where the folks at the top give themselves as much as they can get away with. And if it were looked at that way, it would not survive 10 minutes.
Wait, what was the original question?
We were comparing how we understand.
Wait, hold on.
We were asking how we react to that inequality.
No. The question was why. I asked you, why do you think Bezos is compensated so much more than a frontline employee? Do you think that the demand for those talents is equal between somebody that could be a CEO?
Yeah, so that's a perfectly good answer to that question. Wolff described how the system works, why you end up with that inequality, and it's not just because there are fewer people of Jeff Bezos's capabilities. He described the system, which is a self-serving system, which winds up as rich as it does because it's incredibly self-serving and just seeks to perpetuate those interests within this very small set of people who it deems as deserving of those spoils. That's a perfectly good answer. Instead of trying to discuss the merits of what Wolff is actually saying, Destiny is just crying objection to every single thing he says based on some technicality, or he's trying to mock it, or something else. It's a horrible look. He is not even coming close to holding his own in this discussion, let alone, quote, winning it. I think he's just embarrassing himself badly here.
Versus somebody that could work in a
I
supermarket.
don't think the demand for that talent is an explanation of anything. You'd have to explain why the demand is what it is. Who makes the demand?
Sure, I can. Yeah,
what?
We can talk about all of that. I would imagine you, as a professor, should know the answer to all these questions, right? Where is the demand to running a multi-billion-dollar company that turns profits for people's that? I mean, you can explain all of these things. I don't know why you would pretend there's not answers. Very clear answers for all of these.
You can cast whatever aspersions you want on my qualification.
I'm not casting any aspersions on your qualifications.
Let's stick to the audience Q&A.
Sure,
we have a few more to get through.
It's disappointing that instead of getting an actual answer to anything, it was all moralized. That's all we had. But okay.
Before we get to the next question, that was like the fourth or fifth time that Destiny has brought up the question which he snidely dismisses of moralizing. If you are talking about major economic, social, and political systems that affect the lives and livelihoods and qualities of life, the opportunities, from cradle to grave, just what people are going to be subjected to or able to achieve in their lives, and you're not concerned with morality, there's something broken in your head. This isn't a game, this is people's lives, and why would you talk about economics, society, and politics without being concerned about morality? People often say that the defining feature of a libertarian is a lack of empathy. Destiny is nailing that right here with this callous disregard. He won't even address it, really. He won't address the social implications and the implications for people's lives on what he's advocating. Inequality to him is something we don't talk about. The effects on people's lives, we don't talk about it, according to Destiny. If you're not concerned with questions of morality, go play a video game. This is not the place for you.
Let's stick to the Q&A, okay?
Sure.
All right. The next question, I believe, goes to you, Destiny. If you identify as a SOC Dem, why is it that you did not publicly support Bernie Sanders during his run?
I think that some of what Bernie Sanders advocates for goes in directions that I think would be detrimental to the economy. There were larger policies that he had. I don't know how I feel necessarily about a national jobs guarantee. I definitely don't like the push for like nationwide rent control. These are just certain types of. I don't know if the economy can handle like a 15 an hour federal minimum wage at the federal level. There were just a lot of policies that Bernie Sanders pushed for. I think at one point he pushed all.
Okay, he's against a $15 an hour minimum wage. If the United States can't handle paying a $15 an hour minimum wage, it's not that the economy deserves to collapse. It's that it already has collapsed. And the fact that the minimum wage is so low is just there to mask the fact that this system already isn't working. This is the hallmark of neoliberalism. The only way that they've been able to keep what they've been having, exist going, the only way that they have been able to keep this farce alive is by keeping very low wages and avoiding any dialectical movement forward into the future. There's no pressure on the capitalists. Therefore, they can keep things, there's very little demand on them to do anything different. And therefore, there's no progress. Society stagnates. Industry stays in a rut, and the vast majority of the working people are just clinging on for dear life. In fact, the whole situation is one of clinging on for dear life. The capitalists and the working class alike are just trying to hold on to what's in front of us, but there's not forward movement. It's rollback, it's reaction, etc. If the United States in the 2020s can't handle a $15 an hour minimum wage without things falling apart, then, like I said, that's the bare minimum for any kind of quality of life in this country, with everything being the way that it is. If your system can't provide that, your system can't provide people a decent life. That's already the case. And if you think that there's going to be some massive upheaval if you implement $15 an hour, you're fucking way overdue for that upheaval.
So for that plan for 20% of every business would be owned by workers. I don't know how the United States would manage that. And then his version of Medicare for all went like more extreme than any other version of socialized healthcare in the world. A lot of these things just pushed it way too far for me. I didn't think they were politically viable. I would have taken Bernie Sanders easily over Donald Trump, or probably a few of the other Democratic candidates, but I just felt like there were better middle grounds than what Bernie Sanders was pushing for.
Okay. To you, Professor Wolff, what is the best way to judge the success of an economic system such as capitalism or socialism?
Well, there are many dimensions, many standards, many metrics that you can use. One of them is economic growth. The other one is the distribution of wealth and income that the society and the economic system generate. For me, I'm committed to asking the question whether the people who do the work, who pour their brains and their muscles into the production of goods and services, are or are not entitled to participate in deciding how those goods and services are distributed, how the income, if they're sold in markets, is distributed. I would like to see human beings have the right to participate democratically in the workplace. It is at least as important as participating democratically in the residential community where you live. We have the forms in the latter and the complete absence of it. So for me, a test of an economic system would be how much real democratic participation in both work and residential community life people are able to have. And on that ground, capitalism falls so far short that it's an easy choice.
Okay, to Destiny, under the current conditions of COVID and everything that's happened, as so many people seem to be suffering and it has stratified people between classes, how can you still defend capitalism?
I don't know. People seem
I believe, sorry, this one is specifically about the U.S. response. I think that
oh, yeah, sure. People like to attribute like so many strange ills. I noticed Professor did it earlier when he said our unemployment is very high right now. Like that's a fault of capitalism, and we're just ignoring the worldwide pandemic that's currently occurring. there are ways that our government right now can respond to the pandemic that don't require it to be a socialist government. There have been far more left-leaning governments in other countries that have failed to respond to the pandemic. You can look across the entirety of Europe for examples of that, if you wish. I think that these two things.
Notice that is the second time Destiny has said that, and he has not named a single one. I don't know who he's talking about as more left-leaning governments who are doing significantly worse than the United States in Europe. I'd like to know. You would think he could throw in at least one example rather than just making a totally baseless, unsubstantiated claim. But this is Destiny.
Totally disassociated from other. I think that it is possible to maintain a capitalist economy while also having adequate intervention from the government to alleviate the problems that we have with the pandemic, which we're starting to see under Biden. Unfortunately, it's taken a while, but even under Trump, we saw things like the CARES Act and whatnot as well.
Wait, let him keep speaking. He still has.
Oh no, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt him during my answer. Go ahead, Professor.
Yeah, I would respond in two ways. Number one, the United States has 4% of the world's population and 20% of the world's COVID deaths. For a rich country with a well-developed medical system, that is a systemic failure beyond all words. So for me, yeah, this is a problem of a system that could not prepare itself properly for a pandemic it knows could happen, given the one that we had a century ago, and there are many since that time. And it is likewise a system that was not able to cope very well with what it was unprepared for. The second and final thing I will say is I notice that there are three governments in the world right now, the United States, Brazil, and India, characterized by right-wing governments for most of the time of the pandemic, Trump here, Bolsonaro in Brazil, and Modi in India. Their performances, these three countries, of these three right-wing super pro-capitalist leaders are among the worst in the world, more than pretty much every place else. And I think that speaks volumes to what's at stake in making this decision between the pro-capitalist and the pro-socialist.
I mean, just to be clear, the UK, Italy,
do you want to respond to that?
Belgium.
I'll give it a minute.
I mean, like there are other countries that did worse than the United States, and then comparably, there are countries that also did.
That's an amazing standard to use.
Hey, wait. Let him finish.
There were some that were worse.
Yeah, wait, just let Destiny finish with his response. We'll do a 1 minute time, and then we can get a response back.
I mean, like if you want to look at like the deaths per 1 million population, like a lot of countries around the world dropped the ball on this. Some did very well, and some of the ones that did very well are capitalist countries. You know, places like South Korea that have like heavily liberalized their economy are bastions of like capital success, have done very, very well when it comes to tracking and dealing with this. You know, Australia and New Zealand are capitalist countries, and they also did very well countering this. Places like the United Kingdom that has socialized healthcare that provides education for its citizens, they had a worse deaths per million than the United States did. Again, I'm not saying that like, hooray, capitalism can save us or, you know, any of that stuff. I'm just saying that how your country did, I don't think is necessarily reliant on the
Wait, so he just said, I'm not saying that capitalism can save us. Well, why are we listening to this debate? Because in this entire debate, I mean, basically we have two proposed economic systems, capitalism and socialism. You're arguing against the only alternative. So I think you actually are saying that, whether you want to be saying it or think you're saying it or not.
That you have in your economy. I think it's more important to see what type of action does your government take, which I don't know, maybe Wolff has a definition of socialism where it's also the government coming in and intervening for diseases, but you know, whether you have all worker co-ops or all privately managed firms, I don't see how that matters when it comes to how your country addresses coronavirus.
Could I respond?
Do you want a 1 minute response to that, and then we'll move on to the next question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. At the beginning of this discussion, Steve rattled off about how socialist societies have never succeeded. So he generally equated the socialism with the success. I try to do that now in terms of the COVID response, and he takes exception. He doesn't want it to be so. He doesn't like the linking of the social system with the problem. Well, you really can't have it both ways. I didn't point out that socialism and capitalist countries had some general difference. I pointed out that the three of the worst examples of mass death happened in societies led by people on the extreme right. That leaves a big open space for the variety of other less extreme situations. That's the point of it all.
10
Not
seconds.
that capitalism is the cause of everything, but that it contributes in ways that you can identify and trace.
Can I get a
Question.
5-second response
Let's
to
move
that?
on because okay, fine.
5-second response. I think that you would have an easier time blaming Chernobyl on socialism than you would the coronavirus response on capitalism. That's all I'm saying.
Exactly. That's exactly what you're saying. I see that.
Thank you.
Okay. Can we 2 more questions, gentlemen? Do we have time for that? Is that all right?
I got all the time in the world.
Okay. To Professor Wolff, worker cooperatives survive and thrive all over the world by the thousands. Why couldn't we build a stable, sustainable economy based on the bottom-up, democratically run cooperatives? Emulate that model here in the U.S. Why hasn't it taken off yet? Why hasn't it taken off yet?
Well, there are many reasons. Capitalism, and I will apologize in advance for referring to feudalism and other systems, they not only take a long time to get going and to settle in, but when they do, one of the reasons they succeed is that they develop a culture, a politics that is consistent with, that is built so it reinforces the economic system upon which it sits. Capitalism is no different. If you begin to break down, as capitalism is now doing, and you see efforts, whether they're worker co-ops, or socialist movements, labor movements, and so on, beginning the slow construction of alternatives, they're going to encounter politics and culture that stand in the way, politics and culture that militate against it.
I'm just going to pause here and say, this is what I was saying before, and this is what I felt for a long time, years, is the glaring flaw in Wolff's analysis. Capitalism does stand in the way. That's why I started looking more to, Marxism, Leninism, and other forms of revolutionary socialism that are not, leaning so heavily on just building lots of cooperatives, because at some point you need to have that confrontation. And I'm glad that Wolff is addressing this point. I hope that his answer goes all the way and, satisfies some of these questions, because I do think he gives people a false sense of confidence in this regard.
I can't tell you the number of times I explain worker co-ops to people who really can't get their heads at first around, well, gee, how do they get money, or how do they solve their problems, or how do they grow? Because in their world, there has to be a boss, and the boss has to be, in other words, they have adjusted their own life expectations and understanding of how the world works to the way it is now. All of that is breaking down, but it takes time, and I think that's why you'll see that while worker co-ops have existed from the beginning, when the United States was even just a colony, why it takes a long time before the combination of breakdown of capitalism and the emergence of these alternatives gets up to speed so that people's political and cultural awarenesses allow them to flourish.
All right. Final question to you, Destiny.
Okay, so to weigh in on that, as a socialist, I have many points of agreement with Richard Wolff in this debate and in general. However, I did not find, as a socialist, what he said satisfying to me. This continues to be, in my view, the weak point in Richard Wolff's tips, analysis, whatever, his projections for how we get from capitalism to socialism. I think it is remarkably lacking in detail. I think that there are benefits to and strengths to the approach that he is taking. If you say I'm a Trotskyist, or if you say I'm a Marxist-Leninist, or if you say I'm an anarchist or whatever, and you come out and you identify with a particular movement, you then get bogged down in having to defend the ins and outs, or debate the ins and outs of all the particular missteps, and you also get the benefit of the strengths of that tradition as well. I think that what he's doing is identifying himself with something that Americans didn't hear lots of Cold War propaganda about. I think that there are strengths to that approach. He is saying, Lenin did some things right and wrong, Stalin did some things right and wrong, China's doing some things right and wrong. But again, I believe I said in the beginning of this, I find that approach to be non-committal. Again, there are some positives to doing that. You then don't get into the kinds of sectarian defenses that I do think weigh down certain segments of the socialist movement and prevent progress, because people wind up debating things that happened a long time ago that I think just more attention should be put into the present moment. So I see that effort on Wolff's part. I also think, though, there's a reason that all those specific socialist traditions happened, why they made the decisions that they did. I mean, they had power, or they were striving for power and they were close to power, and they had to make decisions. Like, history forced their hand and it said, choose A, B, or C, make your choice. And they made a choice and they had reasons for doing it. Sometimes it was a mistake, sometimes it wasn't. Wolff is basically advocating for the idea of socialism without really, committing to the history and legacy of socialism. Again, there's strengths and weaknesses to that, but this whole cooperative thing, I hope he at some point takes a more pointedly political approach, because I just think it's flimsy. Happy to discuss this more. If there's a way that we can incorporate, the warm and fuzzy positive face of cooperatives more prominently into a powerful movement for socialism, I'm all about it. That's just not what I get from him, and I hope that that's clear. I have many points of agreement. I have, what, compared to my disagreements with Destiny, what I have with Wolff are quibbles about tactics, messaging, approach, strategy. And, but I also think he's a very capable thinker and a very learned person. And I think that he could be making those contributions if properly pushed to do so. I want more commitment to specifics. That would be great. Not so I can own him in a debate, so we can end capitalism. We're on the same side. So, at least as far as I can tell. I am running this commentary trying to comment ahead of Wolff and then, see how our answers line up rather than just saying, oh yeah, what he said. And they're oftentimes lining up. I've had a few points of disagreement, but by and large, we're on the same page. I think we are talking about and probably sincerely fighting for the same things. But I just don't see in this approach the teeth that we need right now. And that's what I'm looking for. Back to the video.
Why do you never mention Vietnam, especially in relationship to how they handled COVID and their success in that area?
I don't know specifically why. I looked into, for all of my COVID debates, it was usually New Zealand, Australia, South Korea, and then on the flip side, places like the United States and the UK for examples of successfully handling the pandemic versus unsuccessfully handling it. In terms of, that's for the coronavirus stuff. In terms of like economic history, my understanding is that Vietnam tried their single party state. Labor unions can only exist under one party. They had a heavily socialized economy, but much like what existed in the USSR, people after their work shifts would have to spend time throughout the day engaging with like a shadow economy or kind of a black economy or a black market where they would have to buy and sell the goods that weren't otherwise available in their country. In Russia, they did this with a system, or in the USSR, they did this with a system of blats. I don't know if they've got a formal name for it in the Vietnamese economy, but it seems like the way that Vietnam has worked to kind of modernize their economy through, I think they're called I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, it's like the Doi Moi reforms, through all of these referendums they did in terms of bringing their economy more in line with being more successful. These have all involved the liberalization of their economy, the association with other economies around the world. And you could even see with some multilateral trade agreements like the TPP, outside pressure was actually forcing Vietnam to modernize on some of its labor rights. The Socialist Party.
Can I just add, none of this has to do with COVID at all. I think he's trying to make the case that, I think he's trying to make the case that Vietnam isn't socialist and that's why he doesn't talk about it. But he actually started out by saying, I don't know why. Okay, so that was the real answer. The real answer is, I do know why, actually, because they did it very well and it doesn't fit his narrative at all. Vietnam is socialist. It is still predominantly governed by socialists due to, we talked about this earlier in the video, due to U.S. aggression. Vietnam lost support and has had to open up to predatory loans, etc., but this was not by their choice, etc. Continuing.
that country was not able to do it on its own. It needed some external association. And we can see that within countries, even socialist countries, that they still have massive problems with some of their populations. I mean, we can point to the Uyghur situation that exists in China as an example of what is supposedly a socialist country having a huge problem dealing with, equitable shares of how to treat people within its own borders.
So that's not what's happening. China, unlike the US's invented problem of there's a Muslim terrorist around every corner, China is having an actual problem with this, which is documented. You can see on Destiny's face, he knows he's got nothing. He knows he's an asshole. Like, he knows he's making shit up. None of this has anything to do with the question, and he's just blatantly misrepresenting situation after situation. Back to the video.
All right, final question to you, Professor Wolff. Under your system of worker cooperatives, would I still get my PlayStation 5?
Absolutely. You'd have to struggle a little bit for it. You'd have to talk to your fellow workers. You'd have to talk about the distribution of income. You'd have to compare your desire for PlayStation against all the other interests of all the other people. It wouldn't be something you worked out on your own with your particular boss in any way. It would have to be a democratic decision. You'd have to come to terms with that the way you do with democratic decisions now in our society to the extent that we have them. And I would like to add only that if Steve is interested, he could also look at the experience with COVID that the Cubans had, because it is in many ways even better than the ones that the Vietnamese had.
For the purposes of complete transparency, I'm just going to state that last question was actually my own. And now we'll move on to closing statements. We'll begin with Destiny, and then we will end with Richard Wolff. You have 3 minutes.
Oh, geez, I didn't write a closing statement. So at the end of this, I guess my important takeaway for all of this is I think that it is crucial not to moralize our economic systems. I think that when you start to moralize economic systems, what you forget is that an economic system is merely a tool. I don't want to ask a question of like, is a hammer good or evil? I want to ask, what is the best type of nail that you can hit with a particular hammer? When you begin to point out whether or not a particular economic system is...
Okay, so I have addressed this before. Let me say again, this idea that we can leave morality and economics completely separated. Economics are supposed to serve people. They're not a game. They're not numbers on paper. They're not a computer program. They are the ways in which people exchange goods and services and organize industry. Why? To produce things for people. If you try to divorce morality from that and force people to live in a system that serves the needs of a very few people for extreme profit, and just pretend that morality and values doesn't factor into it, I got news for you. You're making a moral choice. You're making a values decision. You're just not valuing democracy. You're not valuing coming up with a system that may have some compromises, it may not, but that is oriented towards actually serving the vast majority of people. Why else would you have an economy? The economy is people producing things. Why else? The whole idea of why we're against capitalism not only is that it's unstable and produces inequality, but it's not working for most people. That would be the inequality. Why do we have a system that doesn't serve the vast majority of the people who participate in it? It makes no sense. And trying to say that morality is not a part of it, this is just covering for the immorality of the system. Because in fact, there are always moral choices being made at every step of the game. Now, as Marxists, we're materialists. We try to evaluate what is possible at a given time. And the fact is, if you're not making the most moral possible choice, you're declaring your values to be antisocial and immoral. So that's the deal, and that is what Destiny is doing.
in and of itself good or evil, then you lose sight of what economies are supposed to do, which is efficiently allocate capital or natural resources in ways that make a country as prosperous as possible. I do agree with Richard Wolff, and probably with every socialist or every left-leaning person around the world, that there are a ton of problems that exist in the Western world, and more specifically in the United States today, relating to things like inequality, social justice, lack of access to things like healthcare or education, or basic things like food stamps or shelter, or other like basic necessities. I just don't see how a socialist society solves literally any of these things. And I don't feel like I've ever been given an adequate explanation by any socialist for how they would organize their society. Usually these arguments are incredibly amorphous or vague, such that literally...
So he keeps going back to the amorphous and vague straw man. This has been addressed head on multiple times. In fact, when Wolff does give him definitions, he swats them away. He doesn't want them. He doesn't want examples. Over and over, he did that in this debate. He has failed to engage with the material. He is not interested in the answers. He's like a broken record. He has learned absolutely nothing from this experience. He's treating it like a game.
Really everything is socialism. Like, you can still have private enterprise and co-ops, and the government does some things, and voila, that's socialism, which just sounds like liberalism to me, with government intervention, which is liberalism. Or they try to make arguments for more strict forms of socialism, but I think that it's hard to get them to admit that in those stricter forms of socialism, they would disallow things like private investment. And I guess it bothers me because so many innovations and things have existed only under the framework of capitalism that even with public research and public pushing, you weren't able to get. For instance, I believe the LED was discovered or was invented in Russia like 100 years ago. And it wasn't until Western private enterprise took a hold of that invention and started utilizing it that anybody was able to actually enjoy the invention.
All right, thank you. And now, Professor Wolff, closing statements. You have 3 minutes.
Sure. I think it's very hard for people to break out of the straitjacket that capitalism, having existed for 300 years, imposes on us, often unconsciously, often through the medium of our parents, our teachers, and so forth. I respect that. That's difficult. Human beings have a hard time doing that. I'm included. But I think that what is unique here is that all those problems of American capitalism that Steve just listed, the difference is whether you see those as distinct problems that you, as a good liberal, think that the government could address or that some institutional adjustment could address. People who have looked at the inequalities, the instability, the injustices of capitalism have tried that for a long time, and it doesn't work. The fact of the matter is we have more inequality now than we had 10, 40, and 60 years ago. That's the system that we live in. It's as though what the liberal does is look for every possible explanation other than that the basic system is the problem and system change is the solution. And one last effort to clarify, since it seems murky for Steve. The difference I advocate is a radical transformation of the workplace so that the person who comes to work is no longer overwhelmingly an employee, a drone, told where to sit and what to do with what machine on what occasion, and then at the end of the day is told, go home. What happens to what you helped to produce is none of your business. That transforming that into a collective community that democratically decides so that every worker has two job descriptions, the particular task and your equal participation in running, designing, and organizing the enterprise. That is a liberation of human capability. It is a transformation of life from the bottom up and represents a kind of socialism which, were it to be achieved, would be a control on the government so it does what the people need and not get shifted off to other things that sustain the state as against the people. That's a lesson learned from the earlier socialisms that the newer socialisms have incorporated. The mass of people will determine, as capitalism, especially in the United States, declines, whether, when, and how to move forward. But the yearning to do better than we're doing in U.S. capitalism, that's already a fact. It's now only a question where it'll go. The very fact that this conversation is happening and that someone like me was invited to participate is itself a sign of where things are going.
All right. Thank you so much for participating in this on both parts. Would either of you like to plug any of your current social projects or what you have going on?
I'm good.
Okay, Richard?
All I would say, if anyone is interested in the kinds of things I have to say, we maintain a website, democracyatwork.info. From there, you can find everything that we do. Very simple.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
I don't know what to do, so I ran it.
Okay, so it looks like Destiny goes on for, there's like another 35 minutes in this file. I may watch some of this, but that was the debate. Just these things are not productive, I think, as a general rule. This one particularly so. And I think the lack of preparation and on Destiny's part is just, you're sitting down to debate with Richard Wolff. You don't know anything about cooperatives. You have a few talking points about Mondragon. These are hallmarks of just being absolutely unprepared to an insulting level, not just to your opponent and guest, but to your audience as well. It shows you couldn't bother to lift a finger to know what the fuck you're talking about, to show up informed. It just makes it look like you're an asshole with a grudge who just wants to try tooth and nail to just argue some particular point, regardless of the facts. That's what I got out of this. And was he like coked up, or was it just the Red Bull, like the twitchiness, the shifting around in the seat, like just insulting, does not show a good faith effort to actually engage with what is being said. Very little attention seemed to be paid. The focus was all over the place to the extent that you could even say that this conversation had any focus. I was not impressed. Anyway, let's check out some of the post-debate comments and see if these have any semblance of meaning to them.
To a similar problem with Pogan, because I think that Wolff is like relatively polite. So I don't want to like cut him off, but like, god damn, when he just like, so how do you feel about Amazon? Well, you see, in 1823, when feudalism was a big part of the Catholic Church, it's like, oh my god, stop. Why are we doing this? How do we define, well, when we talk about what a dog is, we start off by saying that it's not a cat. Wait, what? There were so many things where I wanted to, I think I got a little bit more aggressive towards the end. I was trying to be like more gentle in the beginning, but then it felt like he was getting like fairly condescending. But I don't want to cut him off because I don't know if that's like rude or not. But then it felt like, yeah, I don't know. So I started to take a few more shots towards the last half, but I hope I established that it was because he was kind of starting it. I don't know. He got super mad right after your initial statement. Yeah, like right after my opening, he's like, socialism is... I hate to admit this. I hope my mom's not in chat. The conservatives were right, I guess. Socialism to people is just when the government does stuff, I guess. That was definition one. I didn't get to like any of my 5 challenges. What level of violence is acceptable for you to reach a socialist state? How do we decide which businesses are allowed to exist in a socialist society? But it felt like he squirmed around a lot of these. So like when I asked him, because I asked him like, so are you saying that like only co-ops can exist in the society? He said, well, no, but I'd like more co-ops than private firms to exist. Well, how do you enforce that? And another thing that I hit on, this might be exclusively how I debate lefties in the future. I think I'm just going to talk about capital markets because I feel like a lot of people on the left just don't know anything about the stock market, which is a little bit surprising to me because
is he honestly insinuating that Richard Wolff doesn't know anything about stock markets? Like you thought that was where you got a leg up in here? Wolff was telling him flat out, you don't know what you're talking about and you're making shit up. And Destiny was just like, he didn't have a response except to keep smirking. I'm like utterly stunned, actually. So you think that's your way out of being challenged on any of your shitty points? Also, as far as Wolff getting really mad after your initial statement, I covered that as well. Your initial statement was garbage. It was, 24 random half-baked points that didn't add up to anything. He was probably mad because he had agreed to a discussion with a buffoon, as anyone would be mad about. This whole conversation was pointless and just an exercise in seeing if you could still come out of this stroking your ego without doing any work. And, if you want to tell yourself you won this thing, you go right ahead. But I think that's laughable. This was a joke.
I'm going to talk about or critique capitalism. I feel like private equity markets or like financial markets or capital markets, I feel like that's really important to understand. It's like when you say things like, well, a corporation has no obligation to return the money to you. Like, well, wait, what do you mean? Why do you think they started paying CEOs in stock instead of in actual cash? The whole point of this is because they want the quote unquote owners of the company to be maximizing returns for shareholders. Like, I think that I really do feel like in the future,
wanting them to and having them under that obligation are different things. If they were under that obligation, then they wouldn't have to do things like that. You just defeated your own point. Continuing.
I think for lefties, I think I'm just going to exclusively say, hey, let's talk about the stock market. Most socialists don't even understand materialist conditions. Yeah, geez. I felt that he was floundering in terms of investors. Yeah, and then when he wants to say, well, I can point to you hundreds of thousands of examples where that doesn't happen. Yeah, I'm sure there have been. I mean, look at Enron. Like, of course, there are going to be situations where people fuck each other over. Yeah, of course. The majority of C-level employees' six-figure bonuses are all locked into stock for years. Yeah, of course. I think you're complaining about feudalism was bad. Having a long historical perspective on different ways of organized society seems proper and relevant when talking about the possible evolution from one complex economic system. Well, so technically, oh God, I hate to do this, okay? I hate to debate bro you here, but I'm going to use one debate bro term, okay? It is fallacious to say that because we came from one system and we're going somewhere else, necessarily means we're going to go from this system to the next. And even if I did grant that causality, even if I did say,
it's not a question of whether you're granting it or not, you're failing to engage with it in an intelligent way. You're not actually approaching the subject, you're trying to brush it away. You're trying to sweep it away without actually handling and considering its substance. That was the problem. That's what the commenter is talking about. And what he just said there, that even though every system has, born, lived, died, probably including capitalism, even though it hasn't died yet, we have no reason to think it won't. He's like, but, we have no reason to think it will, except that every other system like it has also died, and capitalism has not shown itself as the most stable system over time. And in fact, people have been trying to overthrow it like forever. So, I don't talk to people like Destiny, thank God, most of the time. I talk to very few people like this, and when I do, it's usually the last time that I talk to them because there's no substance. Speaking of fallacious, it's just a fraudulent way of interacting with somebody. You're not trying to grapple with the substance. You're looking for tricks and ways to... He's not interested in learning anything. And probably on that note, I think I'm going to end this. Let's watch another clip or two. But I am so thoroughly not only unimpressed, this guy's despicable.
Because here's the argument he's making. We went from A to B, and then from B to C, and then from C to D. Now we're definitely going to go from D to E. Even if I did grant that D to E is going to happen, there's no conclusion, there's no reason to believe that E is socialism. E could just as easily be a fascist state. E could just as easily be a post-nuclear war, a post-apocalyptic, anarcho-capitalist, anarcho-communist, anarcho-syndactylist, whatever society, right? E could be anything, right? So that whole line of speaking is... I try to avoid debate bro terms, but it's fallacious. It doesn't make any sense. It is a non sequitur. It doesn't logically follow that because we went from A to B, B to C, C to D, therefore we are definitely going to go from D to E. That needs to be demonstrated. And what E is, E could be socialism or any other number of systems, that also needs to be demonstrated. That argument in and of itself is not compelling. Sorry, fuck. I didn't even get to I didn't even get to address that. But yeah. Why did you say history isn't relevant? Because I didn't like the fact that when he was condemning the actions of the Democratic Party, he wanted to reach back over 100 years and talk about their failures. But when I was trying to get him to tell me what he believed a socialist country was or what socialism was, he was like, well, hold on. I'm not going by Marx's definition. Things are different now. Well, hold on. If things are going to be different now for how you define socialism, which, by the way, that's fair. If you want to use a different definition now, that's fine. But you can't hold the Democratic Party to account for things that another Democratic Party did 100 years ago. I don't think that's fair. I don't think you can do that. You have to be consistent in this. If you
Okay, so I am going to end it here, but let me comment by saying this is just another misrepresentation. This guy cannot handle being wrong even once for 1 second, and he'll never learn you doing things that way. That's not what Richard Wolff was doing. He was, basically Destiny was trying to do this gotcha of like, well, by that definition, the Democratic Party is socialist. And he was trying to say, for 100 years, it hasn't been. For like 2 seconds under FDR, there was briefly a controlling interest in the party that was oriented towards massive reform that could be considered by some stretches of the term socialist in nature, which they immediately started to retreat from as early as the 1940s, and they've been that way ever since, and therefore that is why we don't call them socialist, although socialists do still foolishly, some socialists still do foolishly try to work within that heavily capitalist-dominated party. And, incidentally, kids, get out of the Democratic Party. It's a dead end for exactly that reason. Destiny is crying foul on that. He cried foul on everything. That was his whole way out of, trying to engage with half the points in this thing, was just objecting and crying foul. As far as the previous point that, we went from A to B to C to D, and then we're definitely going to go to E. I mean, he's technically right in a very debate bro sense that, yeah, it's not proven that we're going to E. I don't know that Wolff ever claimed that. The claim is that socialism is a system. First of all, fascism is not different from capitalism anyway. So Destiny, again, doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. But, and whatever the fuck syndactylism is, that was awesome. My favorite kind of dinosaur is a syndactyl. Boy, I get they're actually related to the Mondragon. Anyway. Yeah, good times, fun stuff. This was so challenging, I gotta say. And like trying to go to bed last night with this thing halfway paused was like, okay. So, yeah, he's technically right that we're not definitely going to E. However, that is by far the most clearly articulated next direction. It's the most clearly articulated alternative to capitalism. Odds are that that is where we would end up because there are tens of millions, well, hundreds of millions of people. There's 90 million members of the Communist Party of China alone. There are hundreds of millions of people who are ready and educated to stand up for some kind of socialism. So odds are very, very good that that is where we are going. Destiny, again, objects, cries foul, tries to get out on a technicality. This was just a pathetic, just whining fest from him. And, if you're still taking this guy seriously, I don't know what else to say to you. Listen to this video again. This was an embarrassing, quote, debate performance, and just standing up for this system, capitalism, even after 2008 alone, let alone the fact that what happened in 2008, crashes where people lost a third or half of their savings or worse, they lost their house, their job, on and on and on, destroyed their family, etc. Wound up hooked on opioids because they totally despaired after what happened, on and on and on. You're still standing up for the system, and not only just standing up for it, but in this particular way, blindly, dismissing, by hook and by crook, any which way you can, dismissing serious discussion of alternatives, and still, trying to prop up your argument on what did he throw in there at the end? Innovation? Come on. If you had a leg to stand on with that argument, you would have made it way earlier in the presentation. The opening statement was a joke. Like I said, it was like something out of a paper shredder, just a bunch of loose, unconnected, half-formed points. And I think that pretty much sums up this entire presentation. Kudos to Richard Wolff. I think that while I still disagree with him about some things, he's a socialist and I'm a socialist. We had far more points of agreement than disagreement. He's a prominent voice in the movement with a lot of credentials and credibility. This is a criticism I made of Bernie Sanders. I think that Wolff's politics are arguably better than Bernie Sanders, but it's the same thing. He is, an elder statesman in the movement. People like that, there's just no time to waste. We need to get down to brass tacks, and we need to do it now. And I'm looking for something sharper. I'm looking for something more pointed. I am not looking, in some ways, like I got what Wolff was saying here. He's trying to educate people, particularly in Destiny's audience, is why he went to the broader points. But we need something for the rest of us as well. It's finding good to get people lining up behind Marxism in a general way. This isn't just a popularity contest. We have to deliver at some point on realizing this stuff, bringing it, making it happen, making it come to pass. And again, I just feel like that is a huge blurry area. Unlike Destiny, I want to go to socialism, and that's why I'm complaining about it, not just because it's interfering with my attempts to own here. But I do think we need to fill in more of those details. Again, kudos to Hakeem for asking Richard Wolff in that appearance some more pointed questions. I think that we need to, start demanding of ourselves, of the movement, and particularly more senior members of the movement who are the most educated and experienced. We need action now, and we need to start things really moving more in that direction. All right, I'm going to call it there. Thanks to the current patrons whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen, patreon.com/socialismforall. If you don't want to do that, biggest thing you can do to help, comment, like, subscribe, and share. If you're on Facebook especially, there's some great socialist groups that have like thousands of members. Join them. Please share the Socialism for All videos in there. That has been a great driver of traffic in the past, and I'm no longer on Facebook. So that would be great. I'm going to do one more video on the Democratic Party. I don't like doing those videos because I end up yelling a lot. But after that, I've been really falling behind and neglecting my audiobook duties. I have a slew of over a dozen audiobooks that I have queued up in the chain. So that is what you can expect in the rest of April and early May. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you in the next video.